The Polokwane Heist suspects are expected in court this morning. The third suspect in the fatal Chatsworth hijacking incident is set to appear in court. The national minimum wage bill is passed in Parliament, but will it be made into law in its current form? In your sports, Mamelodi Sundowns' Percy Tau was the big winner at the Premier Soccer League Awards last night. Very good morning to you. Welcome to SABC. You're watching Newsroom. I'm Shante Yankees. Thank you very much for joining us this hour. Coming up, we speak to trade union solidarity with regards to a judgment that was made by a government mediator, of course, allowing a dispute with petrochemicals group Sasol and that strike to take place. This and more coming up in this hour. First things first, let's have a look at your top story. Well, leading at the top of the hour, a group of 7 men believed to be involved in Monday's cash and transit heist are due to appear at the Polokwane Magistrates Court this morning. They are facing charges of armed robbery, attempted murder and possession of unlicensed firearms. Well, they were arrested in connection with an attack on an SPV cash van in which an undisclosed amount of money was stolen. Vehicles allegedly used in the crime were confiscated at a Madiba Park house near Seshoho in Polokwane. Well, 4 of the suspects were arrested at Stoffberg near Klobrisdal in Mpumalanga on Monday evening. Police, who say they have evidence linking the group to the Polokwane heist, are also investigating the possibility the group could be involved in other heists. Well, the man believed to be involved in the Chatsworth hijacking incident in which a 9-year-old was killed is due in court. Sadia Sukraj was killed during a shootout between her father and 3 robbers on Monday. Well, thousands of mourners attended Sadia's funeral service yesterday. It is alleged that her father was driving her to school when he was accosted by 3 armed men at the driveway of their home. The robbers pushed Sadia's father out of the car and sped off with his vehicle. It's alleged her father fired shots at the men who attempted to get away with his car. The robbers fired back, injuring the child in the crossfire. She was declared dead on arrival at the hospital. One suspect was killed allegedly by members of the community. The second was arrested and a third is still at large. Well, questions around security have been raised following the death of 2 girls at Hoërskool High School in the northwest, Stella Hoërskool that is, after an in loco inspection of the premises yesterday. The provincial education MEC Selo Lehari said that security measures at the school were insufficient. Well, the department says that it will ensure that new tighter security measures are put in place. Police are now investigating the motive behind the killing of the pair, allegedly by a 19-year-old.
Stella Hoërskool still reeling from shock following the murders of 2 female pupils at the school's hostel. The provincial leadership has met with the school management. It is at this hostel staircase and in this bathroom where the dead bodies of 16-year-old Chanel Ho and 17-year-old Marna Engelbrecht were found on Saturday morning. Now security is to be beefed up.
You can't have more than 50 learners in a hostel where there is no security. It's very bad. We will work jointly with the school, but the system of security will improve.
Meanwhile, the school management is still battling to come to terms with the incident.
The school did a lot of counselling with the children and with the teachers, and there were different work sessions that the children were divided into to do basic trauma counselling.
19-year-old Zander Belsma, a former pupil at the school, believed to be Chanel Ho's ex-boyfriend, appeared at the Vryburg Magistrate Court on 2 counts of murder on Monday. He has been remanded in custody until August the 6th, when the case resumes. The provincial department will visit all 3 affected families on Wednesday. Police are still investigating the motives for the killings. Olebogeng Khosilinswe, SABC News, Stella.
The South African Council for Educators, or SABC, says that it is not using the Sexual Offenders Register, which is meant to vet teachers. SABC says that the register has neither been updated nor made accessible. They claim that it is the responsibility of the Department of Justice and Constitutional Development. We followed up with Deputy Justice Minister John Jeffrey.
Names are being recorded. There's some 28,978 names on the register. So it is being updated. There is a verification process going on because it was found that there were possibly some names on the register that shouldn't be there. They were convicted of other things. So if you're convicted of a rape of an adult, your name would not be on the register. The purpose of the register is to provide vetting, screening for people who are going to be working with children or with mentally disabled people.
Yeah.
So that process is going on. Obviously, you can't claim somebody is on the register and they shouldn't be there. They could then sue the state.
Well, the DA says it voted against the national minimum wage bill because it has not been subjected to proper public consultations and will push hundreds of thousands of people into unemployment. It says many provisions contained in the Labour Relations Amendment Bill are a departure from what was agreed at NEDLAC. Well, Labour Federation SAFTU has meanwhile vowed to continue to campaign for a national minimum wage that is higher than 20 rand per hour. Well, this comes after the National Assembly passed the landmark National Minimum Wage Bill yesterday. Under the bill, the salaries of more than 6 million South Africans will increase. The Basic Conditions of Employment Bill and the Labour Relations Bill were also adopted. All 3 bills will be sent to the NCOP for concurrence. Well, President Cyril Ramaphosa is soon expected to appoint a panel of experts to deal with the various concerns on the land question. Well, this was revealed yesterday during Deputy President David Mabuza's Q&A session in the National Assembly. Mabuza says another land audit is needed to take stock of land transfers and ownership in the country. The Deputy President also defended government's decision to intervene in the governance of the Northwest by placing the province under administration. Mabuza says material conditions on the ground, including a lack of service delivery, informed this decision. A government mediator has ruled that trade union Solidarity can go on strike in a dispute with petrochemicals group Sasol over its plan to provide a share ownership scheme exclusively to black employees. Well, the ruling opens the way for white workers to down tools over the issue, a new flashpoint in a country riven with the labour conflict. Solidarity, which represents mostly skilled and white workers, declared a dispute with the CCMA over Sasol's plan to exclude white employees from its new share scheme. Well, now for more, we are joined by our studios in Pretoria by Anton van der Bijl, Head of Solidarity Centre for Fair Labour Practices. A very good morning to you. Thank you very much for joining us this morning. Essentially, please tell us what is the main issue with Sasol's Khanyisa plan?
Good morning. Our argument throughout the matter was that the scheme as started by Sasol is inherently discriminatory in the sense that only black employees, as defined by the Black Empowerment Act, receives the benefits of the scheme. You will nowhere see in the Black Economic Empowerment Act that any benefit must only be afforded to black employees at the cost of white employees. So we argued throughout the matter that it's discriminatory and that white employees, or irrespective of race, any and every employees must be afforded the same benefits.
In a statement, Sasol said that it was confident that the share ownership plan incorporates, of course, what they consider to be the most appropriate and best features of BEE and some of the structures in South Africa. Do you not share the same sentiments?
No, most certainly not. We see it as a racist scheme. It divides the employees on a certain race line. and we will proceed with strike if given the necessary mandate by our members. But it's most certainly a racist scheme and needs to be struck down.
Well, for those that are unable to participate in the new transaction, Sasol also then offers many incentives and benefits as part of its employee value proposition, which are available to all racial groups. Have you also not considered those as incentives?
Well, the benefits is part of the benefits are part of the contract of parties. So it's not as if it's given only to white employees. It's part and parcel of every employee's contract. But to say that certain benefits are afforded to employees doesn't negate the fact that the principle, the Kanisa scheme principle, is racist. The benefits is a given. It's not an extra benefit given to certain persons that does not comply or does not receive the benefits of the Kanisa scheme.
Now, currently, we do know that, or possibly maybe you can confirm if the trade union is still in talks with Sasol, and essentially what are the expected outcomes that Solidarity is hoping to come out of those meetings?
The judgment or award that we received from the CCMA in this week state that the parties must engage in a conciliatory process and must have discussions between the parties. So we will proceed on that basis with the CCMA as a mediator in the process. Hopefully some sort of benefit or some sort of arrangement can be made between the parties and benefits be afforded irrespective of race.
Yeah. Now, would you also know that Sasol initially also had another scheme called Sasol's Inzalo scheme? What is the difference between the Inzalo scheme and the current Kanisa scheme?
The Sasol Inzalo scheme was the previous scheme. It lapses or ends in June 2018. So the Sasol Kanisa scheme is a new scheme. It has two phases. The first phase is where shares to the amount of 100,000 Rand is given to all employees. That will be vested in 2021. And then the second phase is the phase where only black employees can participate, and that will vest within 10 years' time. So we have the old scheme in Zalo and the new scheme Kanisa.
Now, Sasol obviously says, its schemes and its shareholding schemes is all about transformation and enhancing ownership of the company by black South Africans. And of course, you are opposed to this. You don't agree?
We are not opposed to transformation as a consequence of proper development, but it's rather one-sided interpretation of the Black Empowerment Economic Empowerment Act. The Black Empowerment Economic Act doesn't state that the benefits must be afforded only to black employees and none must be given to white employees. It only states that black employees must be empowered. So if the same or similar benefit is afforded to all employees, that doesn't mean that there's non-compliance with the Act. So we see that all employees must receive same or similar benefits, and there will be still compliance with the Act.
Now, in terms of the planned strike that has been granted, essentially, will Trade Union Solidarity be handing over a memorandum of demands? Can you give us, some of the points that we would be finding on that memorandum?
Well, we have previously, I think it's in about November 27, we have handed our demands to Sasol, and it's a two-pronged demand in a sense that first we ask that similar benefits be afforded to the white employees or to our members, and secondly that all that amount to the same amount of schemes must be paid out to our members. So that demands have been given to Sasol. We will see in the conciliatory process that will follow what is Sasol's view of that specific demands.
Thank you very much. That was Anton van der Bijl, head of Solidarity's Centre for Fair Labour Practices. Of course, a government mediator has ruled that trade union Solidarity can go on strike with regards to Sasol's Khanyisa scheme and some of the issues around that. Today we're asking on our question, a Walter Sisulu University student whose account was deposited with 14.1 million rand from the National Student Financial Aid Scheme appeared before the East London Magistrates Court yesterday. We're asking you to send us your thoughts on at SABC Newsroom. We do know initially when that story had come to light on social media, also with specific to the amount of money that she had already spent in those numbers of days. Well, we'll just have a look at some of your tweets and comments. This and more after the break.
To help ensure you have enough money for life's journey, Momentum is a plan that multiplies your benefits. So if you protect your stuff with car and home insurance from Momentum, you'll get smart features from our app. You can submit hail and windscreen claims and get approval instantly,
saving you time and making it easier. Speak to your financial advisor or SMS the app to 42024 for a quote.
SABCnews.com is your one-stop digital portal to all the news you need. With a website that is easy to use on mobile, SABC News prides itself in being the primary source of public service content across multiple platforms. Watch live streams of all the big news events on the SABC News YouTube channel, which is one of the most viewed South African YouTube channels globally. And catch up on the best of SABC television and radio news. Follow breaking news on all of the SABC News social media platforms, interact with SABC News on Facebook, and stay connected on Twitter for the latest headlines and real-time updates by our reporters. SABC News, everywhere.
Welcome back. You're watching SABC. This is Newsroom. Well, our question that we're asking today on SABC Newsroom, Walter Sisulu University student whose account was deposited with 14.1 million rand from the National Student Financial Aid Scheme appeared before the East London Magistrates Court yesterday. So now we're actually asking, what are your thoughts? And we've asked you to send them on Twitter on at SABC Newsroom. Of course, she has been arrested and also charged, I think, with theft. It is. We'll get to confirmation on that. And also when it came to light on social media, Mina was saying how she managed to spend so much money. Let's have a look at some of your tweets that have come through on that this morning. All right, so we'll get you those tweets in just a bit. We do know that was a hot topic on Twitter, specifically with the amount of money that she spent in just a number of days. Well, coming through, it was her duty to query, number one, where the money came from. If a drug syndicate deposited money into her account and they traced the money to her, the cops will treat her like a member of a drug gang and be arrested. So if she did wrong, she's also to face the drama. Bakwetu says she did and was told to go back and they said it will be fixed. Of course, replying there, and another reply coming in from Burak saying then it was negligence from their side. It still doesn't give her the right to spend the money that isn't yours. Yeah, it's all fair and well to say. One would never really know what to do if you were in that position. Thank you very much for sending in some of your views. We'll see what comes out of that court case. Our poll that we're asking, do you think that the 20 Rand per hour minimum wage bill should be signed into law? Currently it is a bill. 56% of you are actually saying no, 44% are saying yes. Of course, the DA also saying no. Specific making reference to the fact that public consultations were not made. Let's have a look at what your views are this morning, with just over 700 votes coming in. Well, Jana says, well, that's an insult to the poor workers of this country. Lebo says it's better than the 14 Rand and 38 cents per hour. And Robin says it's not enough, but it's a start as long as it goes up every year, and it can't jump to 12,500 Rand because the economy will then fail completely. Indeed, different views are coming in there. Let's continue with our social media. Moving over to Facebook now. Let's have a look at what you can find on SABC Newsroom this morning. Well, some of the supporters cement remain a high priority. Of course, that's from the ANC. And in Egypt, Sisi to visit Sudan in October amid tensions. Let's have a look now at what's making headlines, the front page and centre continentally in your newspapers this morning, always starting off in South Africa. Well, today, The Citizen is reporting that ANC Secretary General Ace Magashule has claimed the killings of numerous councillors and other political office bearers in KwaZulu-Natal was not politically motivated. And then we have a look at Namibia. The Namibian says that President Hage Geingob admitted that former Information Minister Jakero Tweya complained about the hefty board fees paid to businesswoman Ali Angula when she was chairperson of the Namibia Post and Telecommunications. And finally up north in Nigeria, the Daily Trust reports that a new national minimum wage will not materialize by the end of September, as envisaged by the Minister of Labour and Employment. Let's have a look now at some other news stories making headlines, of course, this morning for the latest on the court appearance of those 7 suspects arrested for Monday's daring cash heist in Polokwane. We are now joined by SABC News reporter Witness Tiva from outside the Magistrates Court this morning. A very good morning to you, Witness. Essentially, just give us some of the details regarding the appearance of these 7 suspects this morning.
Good morning, Shante, and to our viewers at home. What basically happened is that 7 suspects were arrested yesterday. Some of them were arrested in the Groblersdal area in the evening, and in the early hours of yesterday, 3 of them were arrested at Madiba Park, just outside Seshego, outside Polokwane rather. But now we are outside the Seshego Magistrates Court, where the 7 suspects are expected to appear. Let me also indicate that there was a bit of confusion from the police and the NPA side, who were actually not even sure where the suspects will be appearing. But for now, we have just established that the suspects will be appearing before the Seshego Magistrates Court, where a number of police officers have been deployed, and I've seen a number of investigators or officers from organized crime, the Hawks, are also here to ensure that when the suspects are brought in court, there's no security threat in this area, and also a number of units coming from the provincial office of the SAPS are also here to ensure that the safety and security around the court precinct in Seshego.
Now, Witness, can you give us some details with regards to the police and how they made their breakthrough in such a short space of time?
Immediately after the crime was committed on the Polokwane-Matala Road, the police are telling us here that they activated all their units that are in place to deal with such crimes, and some of them were deployed in the Sukukune area along the N1 heading to Pretoria, and also on other major routes to ensure that the suspects do not leave the province. And indeed, that particular move has worked for them because they've managed to arrest 4 of the suspects in the Groblersdal area in Sukukune. And these suspects who were arrested there were able to lead them to Seshego, where 2 of the vehicles, rifles, ammunitions, and other tools that are very key in the investigations were recovered. So that's how the police managed to make a breakthrough. I've just spoken to the Hawk spokesperson Matimba Maluleke, who indicated that their investigations are continuing, and they want to ensure that all the suspects who are responsible for that particular incident are arrested and are brought to court. One other thing that he has indicated is that they have not yet recovered the money which was taken on the the Polokwane Matala Road when the SBV cash van was attacked by a group of suspects.
You know, in terms of what's actually happened, specifically in the community, when the story first broke, community members woke up in the morning saying they had no idea. You know, they woke up to a street full of police cars and security contingents. What is the community of Polokwane saying with regards to this cash heist on such a huge scale, essentially just in their backyard?
Community members in the Madiba Park area and Polokwane in general are telling us that they now fear for their life because they don't know when the suspects will hit, as and when they see this cash in transit vehicles. They tend to fear for their life because a number of these incidences have been reported in Limpopo, particularly on the Polokwane Matala Road. In a space of a week, 2 incidents were reported and the SBV cash van was attacked. A few years ago, we reported on the very same route where the SBV vehicle again was hit by a group of criminals, and about 4 or 5 security guards were killed and set alight inside that cash van. So we've also spoken to the police if they have plans to ensure that security or police visibility do prevail on this busy road between Polokwane and Lephalale, and they are yet still to talk to us on their plans to ensure that cash in transit vehicles are not tampered with as and when they transport cash on the province's major routes.
Definitely. We thank you very much for giving us that update. That was SABC's witness, Tiva, coming to us live from Polokwane. Of course, those 7 suspects that have been arrested are to appear in court. We will be giving you more details on that matter throughout the course of the morning. Well, still ahead, artists are lending a helping hand to the victims of sexual abuse in Bombela. Find out exactly how after the break.
Our stories.
How do I begin?
Our lives. When all seems to fail, we will raise our voices a bit louder for our justice.
Well, I went into absolute shock. My whole body was shaky. I couldn't hold a phone, but there he was. I couldn't believe the nonchalant that they were still in the area 2 weeks later.
And in times when the justice system is not able to help us with our individual battles,
I'm willing to do anything. What are you doing? Nothing. Feeling sorry for yourself? No, it's not an option.
These are our stories on Cutting Edge Channel 404.
Let's have a look at some other lead stories this half hour. A report suggests that 2 children are among the 10 people beheaded in a suspected militant attack in northern Mozambique. The European Union is set to deploy observers to Zimbabwe's general elections for the very first time in 16 years. And Libya's rival leaders met in Paris, France, of course, to negotiate a political roadmap, including elections, in an effort to bring order to the country. Leading at the half hour, 2 children are believed to be among the 10 beheaded allegedly by militants in northern Mozambique. Police in the capital Maputo could not immediately give details of the attack in a village near the town of Palma, closest to Mozambique's border with Tanzania and near one of the world's biggest untapped offshore gas fields. A Portuguese news agency, Lusa, quoting national broadcaster TVM, said that 2 children were among those beheaded, but this could not be independently verified. Mozambique has not been a focal point of militant activity in the past, and police have been reluctant to describe the attacks to terrorists. Some other African news this morning. For the first time in 16 years, the European Union is set to deploy observers to Zimbabwe's general election expected in July. Well, this after the EU and Zimbabwe's government signed a memorandum on Monday outlining guidelines for the election monitors. The elections will be the first since longtime ruler Robert Mugabe was removed from power last November following a brief military takeover. The head of the last European Union observer mission, Pierre Scori, was thrown out of Zimbabwe in 2002 on the eve of presidential elections that were condemned as flawed.
Zimbabwe formally invited the EU in March to send an election observation mission. Mugabe's successor, President Emerson Mnangagwa, will be squaring off against Nelson Chamisa of the opposition movement for democratic change. Elections under Mugabe were marred by corruption, intimidation and violence, but Mnangagwa has vowed to hold a free and fair vote.
This is indeed an important step in the whole series and whole range of measures which have been taken in building confidence in the upcoming electoral process. And we are most happy indeed to have been able to sign this memorandum of understanding, which will now allow us to mobilize the electoral observation mission as soon as possible.
The memorandum sets out the rights and obligations of the EU observers. The new government says its desire is to have transparency in the election process by inviting different international observers so that they can come and observe democracy in action.
The European Union, in its endeavor, desired that they were to be governed by a memorandum of understanding, which would also usher in the manner in which they are going to be conducting their observation mission. And this is exactly the culmination of the signature.
In addition to observing the run-up to the elections and election day itself, the observer mission will also monitor electoral complaints that may be lodged after the elections. 2 US-funded pro-democracy groups on Monday also announced that they were deploying observers for the first time to watch the Zimbabwe vote. The National Democratic Institute and the International Republican Institute said in a statement they were deploying a joint mission in response to President Emerson Mnangagwa's public statements welcoming international observers to monitor the upcoming Zimbabwe elections.
In Kenya, 44 people, including civil servants, have been charged over the theft of $80 million from the country's National Youth Service. Well, that's over 1 billion rand in local currency. The agency had been set up to fight unemployment amongst the youth. Sarah Kamani has the latest on the corruption scandal that has angered Kenyans.
Among those charged was the Director General of the National Youth Service, Richard Numbai, and the Permanent Secretary in charge of the Ministry of Youth Affairs, Lilian Bogo Omolo. They were charged together with other officials from the agency, as well as business persons allegedly involved in the corrupt dealings.
True or not true, Lilian Bogo Omolo?
The National Youth Service is a paramilitary training institution that was formed to help young people acquire skills that would enable them be self-employed. To this end, it is allocated up to $250 million every financial year. The suspects pleaded not guilty to charges of conspiring to commit economic crimes, abuse of office, failing to comply with regulations on public finance management, as well as fraudulently acquiring public property.
Criminal acts are charged separately according to the occurrences.
In one instance, a supplier was paid $5.9 million, yet she did not supply anything to the agency. More people are expected to appear in court in the coming days. This is not the first scandal at the National Youth Service involving the loss of billions of shillings, and neither is it the first time that a public servant is coming to court over corruption. While Kenya's President Uhuru Kenyatta has vowed to deal firmly with corrupt individuals, many Kenyans feel that this is just a cosmetic affair and many will walk free. Sarah Kimani, SABC News, outside the High Court of Kenya in Nairobi.
Well, Libya's rival leaders have met in Paris to negotiate a political roadmap, including elections, in an effort to bring order to the country. Representatives from 20 countries, including Libya's neighbors, regional and Western powers, and international organizations, are among the participants.
The UN-backed conference aims at securing parliamentary and presidential elections in the North African country, if possible, by the end of 2018. Participants to the conference include Prime Minister Fayez al-Sarraj, head of Libya's UN-recognized government in Tripoli in the west, and Khalifa Haftar, the commander of Libya's self-styled National Army, which dominates the country's east. The rival Libyan factions agreed on a declaration that would create a political framework to pave the way for UN-backed elections in December to end the country's 7-year conflict. France, under President Emmanuel Macron, has sought to play a bigger role in coaxing the factions to end the turmoil, which has led Islamist militant gain a foothold and migrant smugglers flourish. The oil-producing nation splintered following the 2011 NATO-backed revolt that toppled Muammar Gaddafi, and since 2014 has been divided between competing political and military groups based in Tripoli and the east.
Well, EU handouts are not always the answer for Africa's returning migrants, but repatriation, even with the help of a grant to build a permanent source of income back home, is not easy. In countries like Senegal, where local economic activity can be slow, many struggle to survive.
The International Organization for Migration and the European Union are ramping up efforts to return African migrants home after thousands have died making the perilous sea crossing to Europe, and governments in some countries push for tougher rules to stem the numbers arriving. The IOM acknowledges that migrants face similar challenges on their return to those that prompted them to leave their home countries in the first place, and that often they try to live again.
If someone gave me a massive project, I don't think I would succeed. And so it really is, how do we accompany the migrant in the best way so that not only are we putting them in a situation where the project is something they want, but also something that their community wants, that their community needs. And then how do we show them at least the small elements of management that will enable them to sustain a business.
The Migration Agency produces pamphlets translated into several languages, informing would-be migrants of what they might be getting themselves into if they try to migrate to Europe. In late 2016, the EU and the IOM launched their biggest repatriation project yet, a $203 million fund to help bring back migrants and jumpstart their lives in a way that would remove the need to head for Europe. The IOM recorded 171,635 arrivals by boat from Africa in 2017, which does not include the likely thousands of others that tried and failed. The new program has so far returned more than 25,000 people to 14 African countries. Of those, 2,700 received money to set up businesses or community projects. IOM said it is too early to judge how well the latest program is working. Experts have expressed concerns about the long-term efficacy of the strategy, especially as the African workforce grows in the coming decades, increasing demographic pressures.
On to news from abroad. US television network ABC has cancelled the hit working-class comedy Roseanne after its star Roseanne Barr aimed a racist tweet at a former advisor to Barack Obama. Well, the 65-year-old sitcom actress took aim at the aide of Valerie Jarrett in a post that read, "Muslim Brotherhood and Planet of the Apes had a baby." She deleted the post and apologized, but could not contain the backlash. Following the criticism on social media, Barr apologized to Jarrett and to all Americans for what she called a joke. ABC described Roseanne's Twitter statement as abhorrent, repugnant, as well as inconsistent with the station's values. Reacting to the network's decision, Jarrett herself said she hoped it would trigger a broader discussion on racism in America. Well, Amnesty International has accused the Nicaraguan government of colluding with paramilitary groups to suppress weeks of student-led demonstrations against President Daniel Ortega. Well, Amnesty says the groups coordinated their attacks with the security forces.
A new wave of protests seized the Nicaraguan capital of Managua this week as support for President Daniel Ortega continues to fade. On Monday, students and demonstrators took over a university. They hurled rocks and set fire to the offices of a pro-government radio station. Protests have gone on for over a month. Last week, talks towards a truce to end them quickly fell apart when another university rally was attacked by police. The protests erupted in April after controversial changes to Social Security. Mandatory worker contributions to the scheme were increased and pensions were reduced. The government responded with a crackdown that left 77 dead and more than 800 injured. The violence has raised questions even among staunch supporters of Ortega, such as those in the Catholic Church and the military. The economy has taken a hit from road blockades set up by demonstrators, but even still, many in the private sector openly back the protests. Calls for Ortega to step down have come from a growing alliance of students, farmers, politicians, and academics. However, so far, he's given no response. If he were to resign, it would bring to an end one of the longest-standing leftist governments in Latin America and a steadfast ally for socialist Venezuela.
Well, back home, and on a positive note, artists are lending a helping hand to victims of sexual abuse in Mpumalanga. They are taking part in the Chicken Challenge, which involves creating artwork shaped in the form of a chicken. It's then sold online to benefit abuse victims.
Chicken, a symbol of parental care. Here, works of art made of recycled egg containers to create a papier-mâché-shaped chicken.
Artists who are, some of them professional artists, some of them are amateur artists at home, will come and buy these canvases from us and we give the money to the people who made them. And they take them home and let their creativity loose, and what you've seen here is what the result is.
This is Lerato, not her real name. The 36-year-old was abused by her boyfriend for years.
My boyfriend used to hit me and stab me. I finally managed to escape when he wanted to burn me inside the house. Then I ran to the police station, then I was taken here. Now I have a certificate in cooking.
Lerato is among hundreds of women assisted by GRIP, a non-profit organization which helps victims of rape and abuse. The organization relies on funds to help those in need.
What we try and do is to actually get funding from other sources. Like you're seeing the Chicken Challenge, it is part and parcel of the money that we utilize for women in the shelter, but also more importantly at our GRIP care rooms.
The chickens are auctioned online. The monies raised will be donated to GRIP to help women like Lerato to get back on their feet, so she too can care for others. Dumela Machogo, SABC News, White River.
Welcome back. You're watching SABC. This is Newsroom. Let's have a look at some of your sporting highlights now. Mamelodi Sundowns' Percy Tau was the big winner at the Premier Soccer League Awards last night. The 24-year-old walked away with two main awards as the PSL honoured this season's top achievers at the Sandton Convention Centre. The Little Magician was named Player and Players' Player of the season.
Percy Tau enjoyed a stellar season with the newly crowned Absa Premiership champions, scoring 11 goals and providing 17 assists in all competitions. Percy was not the only member of the Sundowns contingent to walk away with an award on the night. His mentor, Pitso Musimani, was also named coach of the season.
Fatley Davis deserved it. It shows that, as the chairman has said, that the local breed is coming up very well. You can see the up-and-coming young coaches are coming up very well.
Maritzburg United's brilliant 2017-18 season, during which they finished fourth on the Absa Premiership log, has not gone unnoticed. Their young midfielders, Percy Klendlov, was named both midfielder and young player of the season. Despite his team finishing yet another season trophyless, Kaizer Chiefs shortstopper Itumeleng Khune was named goalkeeper of the season.
Bafana Bafana coach Judd Baxter says he's delighted that for the first time he has a week to work with players before a match or a tournament. Bafana Bafana arrived in Polokwane on Saturday ahead of their first match in the 2018 COSAFA Cup tournament on the 3rd of next month.
Getting this squad together and getting those 7 days it's a bit of a victory already, you know. So if they can kick on now and if we can meet each other and gel a little bit, I think it could be really a good COSAFA for a change.
Well, women's football sponsors Sasol, together with the South African Football Association, have launched the Limitless campaign that is aimed at gathering more support for sport in the country. The initiative is made up of various programs that will include an internship for footballers in the Banyana Banyana setup and those playing in the Sasol League.
The program is designed to put the sport in the spotlight. Limitless will ensure that women footballers receive an holistic support system. Education has been a big part of women's football. It's not only about personal growth, but also about enhancing performance on the field of play.
When you're studying, you get used to being under pressure. And with that, you can also apply what you learn in the classroom to what you do in the field of play, because different circumstances in the classroom also apply in the game. You become a critical thinker.
Sasol and SAFA have taken the opportunity to create a platform from where players can build on. 2 players will be identified on a year-to-year basis for 4 years to take part in the internship program. The players must have the required qualifications when they apply for their position. Currently, sports marketing and sports management are the focus areas.
What that really entails is to get into the corporate world. You get to work at Sasol, at SAFA, as well as one of South Africa's leading marketing sports agencies. And for us, we want to encourage more players to take on education so that we provide them with opportunities.
The initiative comes at a critical period when the senior national team is on a mission to conquer Africa and qualify for the 2019 World Cup.
We all know it's a big year. And I think this has come at the right time to get the support of the people out there, to get the support not just for women's football, but for women in sport in general.
Banyana Banyana expected to assemble for a training camp on Friday ahead of the first leg second round Africa Women's Cup of Nations qualifier against neighbours Lesotho next week. SABC News, Johannesburg.
Some tennis now. South Africa's Kevin Anderson is safely through to the second round of the French Open tennis tournament at the Roland Garros in Paris. Despite the rainy weather, Anderson enjoyed a comfortable straight sets victory over Italy's Paolo Lorenzi.
Anderson is playing some of the best tennis of his career this season, having moved up to 7th place on the ATP World Rankings a few weeks ago. His match against Lorenzi was delayed for about an hour, but the South African barely broke a sweat against the 36-year-old Italian in his opening match at Roland Garros. He hit 49 winners to his opponent's 19 for a comfortable 6-1, 6-2, 6-4 victory. Earlier, Croatia's Marin Cilic looked in control during his encounter against Australia's James Duckworth, having taken the first set comfortably 6-3. The Croat was on his way to claiming the second set, leaving 5-4 with a break before play was suspended. Duckworth seemed to make the better start when play resumed, breaking the Cilic serve in the first game back. but the world number 3 broke right back to eventually serve out the set with ease. Duckworth did better to match his opponent in the third set as neither player conceded a service break. But it was Cilic who dominated the tiebreaker to progress to the second round with a 6-3, 7-5, 7-6 victory. Samantha Mari, SABC News.
That's a wrap up of some of your news and sport. At least for now, we'll take a short break, but we leave you with your weather forecast.
Well, very good morning. Let's take a look first at our satellite image showing us lots of sunshine here over the interior, but over the southwestern parts of the country, cold front making its way towards the southwestern parts, and with it we're seeing these cloudy conditions spreading along the southern coastline towards Cape Akalaste in the south. Otherwise, your rainfall pattern, we're expecting isolated showers over the eastern parts later on today. Otherwise, those clear skies continue here, including our neighboring countries, Botswana and of course Namibia. Closer look is revealing that we've got these calm winds northwesterly in direction here, dominating the country for today. Otherwise, those isolated showers in the east. But tomorrow, a front is making its way towards the country, and with that cold front, we're seeing only isolated to scattered showers here over the extreme southwestern parts of the country. But of course, leaving behind only partly cloudy conditions for the Western Cape, clear skies in the Northern Cape and most of the central interior. But here, starting over the central, going towards the east, we're expecting isolated showers developing here over the Bloemfontein area and moving towards the eastern parts, towards Welkom, Lesotho, and of course ending up in KwaZulu-Natal. Otherwise, clear skies in our neighboring countries once again. Your temperatures for today, we're saying it's a cool day, especially over the Western Cape province, but cold in the southern parts of the Northern Cape. 12 is your maximum in Sutherland and R, while 17 is your maximum there in Komani and Bloemfontein as well at 17. But along the coastal areas, it is just a bit warmer, not very significantly warmer, but just a little bit. 19 is your high in Port Elizabeth, 24 there in Durban, while in the northern parts, Polokwane at 25, and of course Beitbridge there at 29. Partly cloudy conditions for the rest of Zimbabwe, but cool in the northern parts with Harare 23, while Botswana sees partly cloudy and warm temperatures. 26 is your maximum for Francistown, including Gaborone. While here now moving towards the northern parts, no rain expected today for Tanzania, but over the interior places such as Kenya, there are isolated showers possible moving through, including most of the DRC and of course the Democratic Republic of Congo. Is seeing Brazzaville expecting a maximum of 31 and that possibility of rain, while Libreville is at 29. Further down towards the southern parts, cooler temperatures 28 in Luanda and no rainfall possible. Only clear skies just to the south of Luanda there. And as you can see there, Lusaka is at 26 with Kigali at 26. While further north, we're seeing hot temperatures in the Central African Republic of 30, above 30, but still partly cloudy conditions. Here in the southern parts of Sudan, there's a possibility of rain for tomorrow. Isolated showers, including Somalia, with even lower temperatures there, especially over the high-lying areas. But as we move towards Mecca, still very hot temperatures, including most of the southern, including Egypt. And of course, as you move towards Sudan, the southern part is expecting rainfall with a maximum of 37 there. While hot temperatures continue in Agadez, we're seeing lower maximums in places such as South Sudan. But still here in the Middle East, very hot. Riyadh at 31, while Cairo is at 32. And moving towards the west now, we're seeing still clear skies over most of Mali. But along the coastal areas in West Africa, there is that possibility of rain once again. And we're seeing more rain just lying here along the coastal areas. But over the interior, there's also some towns which are seeing some rain, especially starting here in Njamena, including most of Nigeria, Abuja, with a maximum of 29. Leave your weather here for now, but remember, wherever you go, take the weather with you.
So TB continues to be the top infectious killer worldwide, claiming 4,500 lives a day. It is estimated that approximately 1% of the global population is autistic. So if you're on a medical aid, how well do you understand the benefit structure and how your medical aid generally works? And if you're not on a medical aid, have you considered belonging to one? So how much and what should you know about this condition? Is it curable? Can people living with epilepsy, for instance, play sport, drive cars, get employed? 7 million people around the world die annually as a result of tobacco use.
For Health Tip, catch Health Talk every Saturday from 9 to 10.
We're shooting a campaign. We're telling genuine stories from real people that have been affected by the SABC.
It's also interesting to get the backstory in terms of their dreams to be on screen and eventually getting the pleasure to do that.
And understanding that they're communicating on a platform that speaks to millions of people. It speaks to how the SABC can fulfill its mandate.
The SABC represents the opportunity for so many young South Africans, for old South Africans, to be able to look at the world that they may not experience any other way.
People should continue to pay their TV license because it allows the SABC to bring quality programming.
The TV license is really part of the lifeblood of the channel and the corporation.
When you're listening to your favorite jams, you're listening to your favorite radio DJ, you must know that you made it possible by paying your TV license.
It's such a holistic process that goes into TV licenses. It's not only one part where we say South Africans have to pay for TV licenses. You pay a TV license because you get so much value out of it, and that's the content that you get every single day on the SABC platforms.
I have been in the film industry now for 51 years. I am quite satisfied with the evolution of television now, that you have got a lot of actors and you have got a lot of crew members, which will also play part of paying our licenses, because I think it's proper.
The Kalahari Transportier Park is a large wildlife preserve and conservation area in southern Africa. Kalahari means place of thirst. The total area is 38,000 square kilometers. Approximately 3/4 of the park lie in Botswana and 1/4 in South Africa. South Africa embraced the concept of transportiers linking ecological reserves across national borders. On the 12th of May 2000, President Festus Mogae of Botswana and Thabo Mbeki of South Africa formally launched South Africa's first peace park. It has 200 species of birds, including vultures, mammalians such as black Kalahari lions, and large herds of herbivores, namely elands, springboks, blue wildebeest, and more.
How safe is social media? 25 years into democracy and we're still battling with apartheid. Are we really the so-called rainbow nation?
If we can go there, they will beat us something or chase us away or kill you.
Not forgetting the dangers of substance abuse.
We brought those things and came to us. It was looking so tasty with crushed lemons and strawberry and colorful straws.
Importance of education for all. Is the judiciary and government failing the people of South Africa? These are some of our stories on Cutting Edge. Catch it every Sunday at 5:30.
The Polokwane heist suspects are expected to appear in court this morning. The third suspect in the fatal Chatsworth hijacking incident is set to appear in court. The national minimum wage bill is passed in Parliament, but will it be made into law in its current form? And in your sports, Mamelodi Sundowns' Percy Tau was the big winner at the Premier Soccer League Awards last night. Hello and welcome to SABC Watching Newsroom. I'm Shante Yankees. Coming up this hour, 2 children are believed to be among the 10 beheaded allegedly by militants in northern Mozambique. We speak to Executive Director at SA Terrorism Analysis Center for more on that story. First things first, let's have a look at your lead stories. Well, leading at the top of the hour, a group of 7 men believed to be involved in Monday's cash and transit heist are due to appear at the Polokwane Magistrates Court this morning. They are facing charges of armed robbery, attempted murder and possession of unlicensed firearms. They were arrested in connection with an attack on an SBV cash van in which an undisclosed amount of money was stolen. Vehicles allegedly used in the crime were confiscated at a Madiba Park house near Seshego in Polokwane. 4 of the suspects were arrested at Stofberg near Roseanne in Mpumalanga on Monday evening. Police, who say they have evidence linking the group to the Polokwane heist, are also investigating the possibility that the group could be involved in other heists. Well, the man believed to be involved in the Chatsworth hijacking incident in which a 9-year-old was killed is due in court. Sadia Sukraj was killed during a shootout between her father and 3 robbers on Monday. Well, thousands of mourners attended Sadia's funeral service yesterday. It's alleged that her father was driving her to school when he was accosted by 3 armed men at the driveway of their home. The robbers pushed Sadia's father out of the car and sped off with his vehicle. It's then alleged that her father fired shots at the men who attempted to get away with his car. The robbers fired back, injuring the child in the crossfire. She was declared dead on arrival at the hospital. 1 suspect was killed allegedly by members of the community. The second was arrested and a third is still at large. Well, questions around security have been raised following the death of 2 girls at the Northwest Stella High School hostel. After an in-loco inspection of the premises yesterday, the Provincial Education MEC, Selo Lahari, says security measures at the school were insufficient. The department says it will ensure that new tighter security measures are now put in place. Police are investigating the motive behind the killing of the pair, allegedly by a 19-year-old teen. Olebogeng Khosilenswe reports.
Stella Hoër School still reeling from shock following the murders of 2 female pupils at the school's hostel. The provincial leadership has met with the school management. It is at this hostel staircase and in this bathroom where the dead bodies of 16-year-old Chanel Ho and 17-year-old Marna Engelbrecht were found on Saturday morning. Now security is to be beefed up.
You can't have more than 50 learners in a hostel where there is no security. It's very bad. We will work jointly with the school, but the system of security will improve.
Meanwhile, the school management is still battling to come to terms with the incident.
The school did a lot of counselling with the children and with the teachers, and there were different work sessions that the children were divided into to do basic trauma counselling.
19-year-old Zander Belsma, a former pupil at the school, believed to be Chanel Ho's ex-boyfriend, appeared at the Vryburg Magistrate Court on 2 counts of murder on Monday. He has been remanded in custody until August the 6th, when the case resumes. The provincial department will visit all 3 affected families on Wednesday. Police are still investigating the motives for the killings. Olebogeng Khosilenswe, SABC News, Stella.
Well, the South African Council for Educators, or SAS, says that it is not using the Sexual Offenders Register, which is meant to vet teachers. SAS says that the register has neither been updated nor made accessible. They claim that it is the responsibility of the Department of Justice and Constitutional Development. We followed up with Deputy Justice Minister John Jeffrey.
Names are being recorded. There's some 28,978 names on the register. So it is being updated. There is a verification process going on because it was found that there were possibly some names on the register that shouldn't be there. They were convicted of other things. So if you're convicted of a rape of an adult, your name would not be on the register. The purpose of the register is to provide vetting, screening for people who are going to be working with children or with mentally disabled people.
Yeah.
So that process is going on. Obviously, you can't claim somebody is on the register and they shouldn't be there, they could then sue the state.
DA says it voted against the national minimum wage bill. Apologies, because it has not been subjected to proper public consultations and will push hundreds of thousands of people into unemployment. It says that many provisions contained in the Labour Relations Amendment Bill are a departure from what was agreed at NEDLAC. Labour Federation SAFTU has meanwhile vowed to continue to campaign for a national minimum wage that is higher than 20 Rand per hour. Well, this comes after the National Assembly passed the landmark National Minimum Wage Bill yesterday. Under the bill, the salaries of more than 6 million South Africans will increase. The Basic Conditions of Employment Bill and the Labour Relations Bills were also adopted. All three bills will be sent to the NCOP for concurrence. Well, President Cyril Ramaphosa is soon expected to appoint a panel of experts to deal with the various concerns of the land question. Well, this was revealed yesterday during Deputy President David Mabuza's Q&A session in the National Assembly. Mabuza says another land audit is needed to take stock of land transfers and ownership in the country. The Deputy President also defended government's decision to intervene in the governance of the Northwest by placing the province under administration. Mabuza says material conditions on the ground, including a lack of service delivery, informed this decision. A question that we're asking you on SABC Newsroom today, of course, with regards to that Walter Sisulu University student whose account was deposited with 14.1 million Rand from the National Student Financial Aid Scheme, has now appeared before the East London Magistrates Court yesterday. We've asked you, what are your views and your thoughts on that charge and, of course, her now being arrested? We've asked you to send us your tweets and comments on @SABC Newsroom. We'll have a look at this and more after the break.
And shut up, you stay lazy and listen.
The Honourable President told me to shut up.
It's up to the leadership of the DA to make a decision whether we continue to fight like we are doing now, or we put the people of the city of Cape Town first.
You must go, Chief. You called me a dog here.
Ma, come back and leave after giving us a signal.
This is SABC News.
A very good morning to you, and thank you so much indeed for choosing Morning Live.
But I want to know the basic thing.
Griselda Lewis, SABC News, in Parktown, Johannesburg.
Zimbabwe, Mzwandile Mbeje, SABC News, Luanda, Angola.
Let's take a look at your market indicators.
Thanks for staying with Morning Live. Let's bring you your sports news.
Let's take a look at your satellite image.
Set the agenda for the day with Morning Live.
Well, a question that we're asking you today on that Walter Sisulu University student whose account was deposited with 14.1 million Rand from the National Student Financial Aid Scheme, apparently by mistake, appeared before the East London Magistrates Court yesterday. So we've asked you to send in some of your views and your comments on that, specifically with regards to the money. Should she have spent it? Did she notify the bank? What was she supposed to do? Let's hear some of your comments and tweets that have come comes through this morning on that. The Khasa says the Walter Sisulu University student is innocent. The CFO should be held responsible and pay the money that was wrongly transferred. The teacher says, Edward on Twitter says, no, she's not guilty. Alpha says, we are not hearing anything about the person who actually transferred that amount to the student. What happened to that person? Yeah, Alpha, that's a very good question. Well, we're going to have to wait and see. Those court proceedings are due to get underway as the student has now been officially charged. We've also been running our poll this morning. Do you think that the 20 Rand per hour minimum wage bill should be signed into law? Of course, it is still in discussion. The DA, they're opposing it, also saying that the public has not been consulted. However, we do know SAFDA, on the other hand, is pushing a way forward to make sure that 20 Rand is not the minimum per hour. Well, 44% of you are saying yes, 56% of you are saying no. Just over 700 votes coming in. Let's have a look at who are your views and comments behind those numbers and percentages this morning. Well, we'll have a look at some of those tweets in just a bit. Let's also have a look at our sports question. Just before we get to that, those tweets have just popped up. Well, it's been forced upon us. I vote yes, only because of the intention to move the most vulnerable from exploitation, but I do not agree with 20 Rand. What a horrible position to find myself. And Alpha says, that's money for food and transport. Oh, how I wish the 2019 elections were next week. Last one coming in from Putejo saying, the ruling party is playing with South Africans. South Africans will be unable to buy their own houses or a car. 3,500 Rand is nothing. Yeah, well, the PSL Awards took place last night. And our sporting question, what do you make of the winners of those awards that took place last night? To send us in your comments as well as your tweets on @SABC Newsroom. Let's have a look at that. Well, Easy D says, handing the wrong awards to winners. Now I have a reason why Hlompo never won. Nazim says, congratulations to all the winners. They deserve to win, especially Percy Tau. And the last one from Sonwabile, well-deserved Pitso as well as Percy Tau. That was both our question and our poll. Thank you very much for participating and giving in some of your comments and your views there. Let's have a look now at what's making headlines around the continent this morning. We'll start off here in South Africa. The Citizen is reporting that ANC Secretary General Ace Bangashule has claimed the killings of numerous councillors as well as other political office bearers in KZN were not politically motivated. In Namibia, the Namibian says that President Hage Geingob admitted that former Information Minister Chikero Tweya complained about the hefty board fees paid to businesswoman Ali Angula when she was chairperson of the Namibia Post and Telecommunications. And finally, up north in Nigeria, the Daily Trust reports that a new national minimum wage will not materialize by the end of September, and as envisaged by the Minister of Labour and Employment. Also ahead, artists are lending a helping hand to the victims of sexual abuse in Mbombela. Find out how after the break.
News at 9. We go beyond the headlines of the day and breaking news to bring you all the angles and in-depth analysis of stories that impact your life. We are on the ball with all economic stories. Our bureaus around the globe are ready to connect you to events as and when they happen. So join us every day at 9 to zoom in on the day's big stories.
How safe is social media? 25 years into democracy and we're still battling with apartheid. Are we really the so-called Rainbow Nation?
If you can go there, they will beat us something or chase us away.
Kill you also.
Or kill you.
Not forgetting the dangers of substance abuse.
When he brought those things and came to us, they were looking so tasty with crushed lemons and strawberry and colorful straws.
Importance of education for all.
Yes,
Is the judiciary and government failing the people of South Africa? These are some of our stories on Cutting Edge. Catch it every Sunday at 5:30.
Welcome back. Let's have a look at some other news making headlines this half hour. Reports are suggesting that 2 children are among the 10 people beheaded in a suspected militant attack in northern Mozambique. We speak to a terrorism analysis on that. Well, the European Union is set to deploy observers to Zimbabwe's general elections for the first time in 16 years. Libya's rival leaders meet in Paris to negotiate a political roadmap in an effort to bring order to the country. Well, for the first time in 16 years, the European Union is set to deploy observers to Zimbabwe's general election expected in July. This after the EU and Zimbabwe's government signed a memorandum on Monday outlining guidelines for election monitors. The elections will be the first since longtime ruler Robert Mugabe was removed from power last November following a brief military takeover. Well, the head of the last European Union observer mission, Pierre Scori, was thrown out of Zimbabwe in 2002 on the eve of presidential elections that were condemned as flawed.
Zimbabwe formally invited the EU in March to send an election observation mission. Mugabe's successor, President Emmerson Mnangagwa, will be squaring off against Nelson Chamisa of the opposition movement for democratic change. Elections under Mugabe were marred by corruption, intimidation and violence, but Mnangagwa has vowed to hold a free and fair vote.
This is indeed an important step in the whole series and whole range of measures which have been taken in building confidence in the upcoming electoral process. And we are most happy indeed to have been able to sign this memorandum of understanding, which will now allow us to mobilize the electoral observation mission as soon as possible.
The memorandum sets out the rights and obligations of the EU observers. The new government says its desire is to have transparency in the election process by inviting different international observers so that they can come and observe democracy in action.
The European Union, in its endeavor, desired that they were to be governed by a memorandum of understanding, which would also usher in the manner in which they are going to be conducting their observation mission, and this is exactly the culmination of the signature.
In addition to observing the run-up to the elections and election day itself, the observer mission will also monitor electoral complaints that may be lodged after the elections. 2 US-funded pro-democracy groups on Monday also announced that they were deploying observers for the first time to watch the Zimbabwe vote. The National Democratic Institute and the International Republican Institute said in a statement they were deploying a joint mission in response to President Emmerson Mnangagwa's public statements welcoming international observers to monitor the upcoming Zimbabwe elections.
Staying with African news, 2 children are believed to be among the 10 beheaded, allegedly by militants in northern Mozambique. Police in the capital of Maputo could not immediately give details of the attack in a village near the town of Palma, close to Mozambique's border with Tanzania and near one of the world's biggest untapped offshore gas fields. A Portuguese news agency, Lusa, of course quoting TVM, said that 2 children were among those beheaded, but this could not be independently verified. Mozambique has been a focal point of militant activity in the past, and police have been reluctant to ascribe the attacks to terrorists. In Kenya, 44 people, including civil servants, have been charged over the theft of $80 million from the country's National Youth Service. Well, that's over 1 billion rand in local currency. The agency had been set up to fight unemployment amongst the youth. Sarah Kimani has the latest on the corruption scandal that has angered Kenyans.
Among those charged was the Director General of the National Youth Service, Richard Numbai, and the Permanent Secretary in charge of the Ministry of Youth Affairs, Lilian Mbogo Omolo. They were charged together with other officials from the agency, as well as business persons allegedly involved in the corrupt dealings.
True or not true, Lilian Mbogo Omolo?
The National Youth Service is a paramilitary training institution that was formed to help young people acquire skills that would enable them be self-employed. To this end, it is allocated up to $250 million every financial year. The suspects pleaded not guilty to charges of conspiring to commit economic crimes, abuse of office, failing to comply with regulations on public finance management, as well as fraudulently acquiring public property.
Criminal acts are charged separately according to the occurrences.
In one instance, a supplier was paid $5.9 million, yet she did not supply anything to the agency. More people are expected to appear in court in the coming days. This is not the first scandal at the National Youth Service involving the loss of billions of shillings, and neither is it the first time that a public servant is coming to court over corruption. While Kenya's President Uhuru Kenyatta has vowed to deal firmly with corrupt individuals, many Kenyans feel that this is just a cosmetic affair, and many will walk free. Sarah Kimani, SABC News, outside the High Court of Kenya in Nairobi.
Well, currently, Cape Town Mayor Patricia de Lille is tabling her budget vote in council ahead of next week's court matter challenging her expulsion from the DA. She has been reinstated as mayor temporarily, pending the outcome of that court bid. We cross over live.
These vulnerable residents with rebates and free basic services such as electricity, refuse removal, water, sanitation to residents who qualify for the rebates. Where properties are valued at 100,000 and below, these households qualify for 100% rebates and refuse removal rebates. And these residents also receive 10,500 litres of free water and 7,350 litres of free sanitation. In properties valued above 100,000 and below 150,000, these residents get 100% rates rebate, 75% of refuse removal charges, and 10,500 litres of free water and 7,350 litres of free sanitation. Property values between 150,000 and 400,000 all receive 10,500 litres of free water and 7,350 litres of free sanitation, and between 50 and 25% of the refuse removal charges. There's also relief with electricity charges for consumers on Lifeline tariff, where the consumption is on an average of 250 units per month. These residents receive 60 units free per month, and where consumption is between 250 and 450 units, these households will each receive 25 units free each month. The city also uses household income as a factor to determine which residents qualify for assistance. For instance, where the gross monthly household income is 4,000 Rand or below, these households can get 100% rates rebate and receive the same benefits as if their properties were valued below 100,000. There are also various levels of rates rebates available for where households' income is between 4,001 and 6,000 Rand. In conclusion, Mr. Speaker, senior citizens and disabled persons who qualify for rates rebate where the household income, also qualified for rates rebate, where the household income is below 15,000 Rand. I do want to make an appeal to all councillors to assist the most vulnerable and the communities that need help to apply for this rebate, so that we can make sure that we build a caring city and the people that deserve our assistance and help are helped by us. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Councillor Sotashi.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. Mr. Speaker, we can't pretend as if all is well in the city of Cape Town.
Oh, please.
We've been denied the opportunity to deliberate on the developments in the city of Cape Town. We are called here, Mr. Speaker, to come and deliberate on what you call the fruits of a poison tree. This poison tree belongs to Alderman Ian Sunroof Nelson. Mr. Speaker, the mayor made reference. Mr. Speaker, the mayor made reference to...
Point of order, Speaker. Point of order. Point of order, Speaker. He cannot call the
Councillor
deputy...
Sotashi, one moment. The point of order, where's the... Yes?
Here's the point of order. He cannot call the deputy speaker that name that he just called. He must withdraw, please.
Yes. Councillor...
He must withdraw.
Councillor Sotashi, please withdraw that remark. The remark that you made. Councillor... he wants to know which one. He made quite a few of remarks.
He knows exactly what it is. He must just withdraw it.
What remark is it? Councillor? Councillor? The remark. Councillor Sotashi, please continue. Councillor Sotashi? Councillor, what remark was made? Yes? Councillor?
He called the deputy sunroof.
Sunroof.
Let him just withdraw.
Councillor Sotashi, the rule says you must refer to fellow members in the council chamber with respect. Please be so kind to withdraw that.
They have no respect.
Withdraw the insult. Withdraw the insult.
And now they have to perform.
Enjoys that name, but I will withdraw it.
Okay.
Mr. Speaker, we are not going to legitimize the fruits of a poison tree. We are going to focus on the developments and the process led up to where we are today in terms of what the mayor was delivering earlier. Today, Mr. Speaker, 22 days after a premeditated coup d'etat in one of South Africa's largest and most strategic cities, we are called to deliberate on a budget which has been cobbled together against the background of ruthless attempts to replace constitutional governance with a cabal of prominent politicians and their corporate allies.
Councillor Diamond.
Driven by mercenary and nefarious motives. What has been witnessed in the events leading to these deliberations about how the financial and other resources of this city will be apportioned. It is the true face of unbridled greed and power mongering. This was well-orchestrated process of governance paralysis.
Just coming out of that briefing just moments ago, we saw temporary Mayor Petrodillo tabling her budget vote. Of course, we will be giving more details on that. Continuing now with African news, Libya's rival leaders have met in Paris to negotiate a political roadmap, including elections, in an effort to bring order to the country. Representatives from 20 countries, including Libya's neighbours, regional Western powers and international organisations, were among the participants.
The UN-backed conference aims at securing parliamentary and presidential elections in the North African country, if possible, by the end of 2018. Participants to the conference include Prime Minister Fayez al-Sarraj, head of Libya's UN-recognized government in Tripoli in the west, and Khalifa Haftar, the commander of Libya's self-styled National Army, which dominates the country's east. The rival Libyan factions agreed on a declaration that would create a political framework to pave the way for UN-backed elections in December to end the country's 7-year conflict. France, under President Emmanuel Macron, has sought to play a bigger role in coaxing the factions to end the turmoil, which has led Islamist militant gain a foothold and migrant smugglers flourish. The oil-producing nation splintered following the 2011 NATO-backed revolt that toppled Muammar Gaddafi, and since 2014 has been divided between competing political and military groups based in Tripoli and the east.
Well, EU handouts are not always the answer for Africa's returning migrants, but repatriation, even with the help of a grant to build a permanent source of income back home, is not easy. In countries like Senegal, where local economic activity can be slow, many still struggle to survive.
The International Organization for Migration and the European Union are ramping up efforts to return African migrants home after thousands have died making the perilous sea crossing to Europe, and governments in some countries push for tougher rules to stem the numbers arriving. The IOM acknowledges that migrants face similar challenges on their return to those that prompted them to leave their home countries in the first place, and that often they try to live again.
If someone gave me a massive project, I don't think I would succeed. And so it really is, how do we accompany the migrant in the best way so that not only are we putting them in a situation where the project is something they want, but also something that their community wants, that their community needs. And then how do we show them at least the small elements of management that will enable them to sustain a business.
The Migration Agency produces pamphlets translated into several languages, informing would-be migrants of what they might be getting themselves into if they try to migrate to Europe. In late 2016, the EU and the IOM launched their biggest repatriation project yet, a $203 million fund to help bring back migrants and jumpstart their lives in a way that would remove the need to head for Europe. The IOM recorded 171,635 arrivals by boat from Africa in 2017, which does not include the likely thousands of others that tried and failed. The new program has so far returned more than 25,000 people to 14 African countries. Of those, 2,700 received money to set up businesses or community projects. IOM said it is too early to judge how well the latest program is working. Experts have expressed concerns about the long-term efficacy of the strategy, especially as the African workforce grows in the coming decades, increasing demographic pressures.
In news just coming in, Zimbabwe elections will be held on the 30th of July. This was just been announced by Zimbabwean President Emmerson Mnangagwa through a government document. Mnangagwa, who became president following the military takeover, has promised to deliver on free and fair elections. The vote will put him against a clutch of opponents, including 40-year-old Nelson Chamisa from the main opposition movement for a democratic change. Staying with international news, the UN Security General has travelled to the most dangerous peacekeeping mission in the world to mark the International Day of UN Peacekeepers. Antonio Guterres arrived in Mali earlier on Tuesday to express his solidarity with UN colleagues facing high casualties and enormous volatility in certain conflict theatres around the globe. While an official commemoration will be held on Friday at the UN headquarters in New York to honour the 129 personnel who lost their lives in peacekeeping operations last year, missions like the one in South Sudan have already paid their respects.
A country where peace has been difficult to keep, as regional and international efforts make little progress in silencing the guns in the world's youngest and among the poorest nations anywhere.
Peacekeepers can work to protect civilians, but ultimately a safe, secure future can only come through political solutions. Peacekeepers can never be substitutes for the political will of the parties to end conflict. Partnerships, including with the regional organisations I mentioned before, the government and communities, are critical for UN peacekeeping to achieve results. And through our UN's good officers, we will press on to find a negotiated settlement and a lasting solution, as we try very hard to do at the latest talks, and Addis, alongside many of the counterparts.
55 troops have died while in the service of the UN mission to South Sudan, either in the line of duty or due to illness, while those who continue to serve do so in a complex and challenging environment.
We appreciate all that UNRWA is doing, not only in terms of creating the conditions that enables the international community through the generous donation and assistance of countries that provide financial resources to undertake these humanitarian operations. Not only do we appreciate them for doing that, but we also appreciate them for having opened their doors to people who are fleeing conflict to seek refuge.
Because you are beautiful.
This officer is the first female police commissioner to serve in the UN mission in South Sudan.
We are engaging with mostly the vulnerable people that are protected within this protection of civilian side. And of course, a lot of them are women and children. So therefore, the role of women, police in UNPOL is very, very important, so that we can be able to bridge the gap with the community that we are serving in the POC side.
This year, the UN marks its 70th anniversary of peacekeeping. Since 1948, over 1 million men and women have served under the United Nations flag in 71 peacekeeping operations, directly impacting the lives of hundreds of millions, while protecting vulnerable populations and saving countless lives. Issues of widespread sexual abuse and exploitation have tarnished the image of blue helmets in recent years, prompting the United Nations to adopt a zero-tolerance approach, while the theatres of conflict have become increasingly complex, leading to attacks against the very people sent to protect vulnerable populations. Sherman Bryce-Pease, SABC News, New York.
Well, staying with news abroad, US television network ABC has cancelled the hit working-class comedy Roseanne after its star Roseanne Barr aimed a racist tweet at a former advisor to Barack Obama. The 65-year-old sitcom actress took aim at the aide Valerie Jarrett in a post that read, "Muslim Brotherhood and Planet of the Apes had a baby." She deleted the post and apologized, but could not contain the backlash. Following the criticism on social media, Barr apologized to Jarrett and to all Americans for what she called a joke. Well, ABC described Roseanne's Twitter statement as aberrant, repugnant and inconsistent with the station's values. Reacting to the network's decision, Jarrett herself said she hoped it would trigger a broader discussion on racism in America. Well, the Prevention and Combating of Hate Crime and Hate Speech Bill will come under the spotlight in Parliament today. The Justice Department is today briefing the Portfolio Committee on Justice and Correctional Services on the bill. Well, Cabinet approved the Prevention and Combating of Hate Crimes and Hate Speech Bill on the 14th of March this year. It is expected that once the bill is approved, it will help to eradicate not only racism, but all forms of discrimination. Let's go live to the briefing. It is currently away in Parliament in Cape Town.
The Grace Bible Church incident would not be hate speech. However, the Stephen Anderson, that American preacher, would be, because he was advocating attacks and death to homosexuals. So just that. The issue of the penalties, as Mr. Bassett had said, there was a debate around and it's also linked to the seriousness issue. If you're saying that hate crimes, hate speech and hate crimes are serious, then if you say the matter can be diverted or you encourage diversion by putting it in the Act, are you then actually saying it's not so serious? But it as he'd said, can be it can be brought up, but it's not specifically provided for in the Act. That's something that there may be debates over. So I just wanted to add those points, Chairperson.
Deputy Minister and officials, I just want to make the following opening remarks. That the central problem, which I want to characterize as the national question in this country, is that of racism. And when I read the Constitution, I will understand it to say we want to create the strategic objective is to create a non-racial, non-sexist, and democratic South Africa. Are we saying that criminalization of racism is something that must be postponed, and that for now we should just deal with intolerances or prejudices which are already dealt with in various statutes books? If not, at what point are we going to deal with the central issue of racism, which lies at the heart of the problems that centuries were spent in the struggles by our people? But secondly, South Africa means all the people in South Africa. And more than 80% of the people are traditional communities. Now, if we say that only directors or public prosecutors can initiate the proceedings, are we not elevating the offenses to modern courts to the exclusion of traditional and community courts, which are also, in terms of the law, part of the legal system? Would that not exclude the majority of the people who, as matters stands now, don't even have access to the modern courts? And if you take matters to the regional courts, that also presupposes the use of legal representation. And you know, legal representation is expensive. And we're also a multicultural society, interfaith, interreligious society. Are we not trying to criminalize moral issues without taking society along with us? Wouldn't it have been useful really to have a national dialogue on these issues before we criminalize them? Are we not running ahead of the people and therefore create more problems? Are we not going to end up with more people in already overcrowded prisons because of intolerances and so on? And if you say you had thousands of submissions, would it not have been helpful that a report, a summary of those submissions is made, circulated, so that we gain insights into what society is saying about this? Also, you know, there's a case of Mombek about the use of the K word. You know, some of us who tend to read history try to trace the origins of the K word. You find that in some religions, for instance in Islam, that K word simply means a non-believer. Now, if we have not educated the public about these issues, and an innocent member of an Islamic institution in the rural area uses the K word because that person is trying to refer to someone as not believing in his religion. Are we going to take such people to court, find them guilty of a criminal offense, and so on? All I'm saying is, are we not actually running ahead of society and risking creating more problems than the problems that we want to solve? I recall that you also had a forum against racism in the department, which has existed for more than 15 years. Wouldn't it have been helpful also that we get a report of what that forum has produced? In short, I'm saying that we are such an interreligious society, multicultural society, and can we really deal with the challenges of such a complex society by criminalizing all kinds of intolerances in the society without doing that in tandem with the community dialogues, national dialogue, community education? Can you just maybe address us on the desirability of this act, which in my view, firstly, does not address this national question of racism, secondly, which kinds of runs ahead of public education, because we may end up making criminals out of people who are innocent, because although it is said, ignorance of the law is no mistake, but I think that we have a duty to. We have a new dispensation, a human rights dispensation. We have a duty to educate our people on human rights so that when we criminalize activities, we are sure that we are moving, matching and matching with the society. Otherwise, we'll just fill the prisons, which are already overcrowded. So, in short, what is the desirability of this hate bill, except that some people called for it, but by its nature already, I think it is exclusive of the traditional communities. They wouldn't be able to access this courts. Can we hear Advocate Bassett? What was the?
Can I respond on this? Look, the bill does criminalize racism, so I'm not sure, but our constitutional framework is based on the equality clause, and that any inequality then has consequences, and that's where Papuda comes in. and papuda gets used for any kind of abusive language, for example. So whether it is about a person's religion, about a person's sexual orientation, about a person's race, papuda can be used. But the problem is papuda is civil, which means you've got to, well, you can use an equality court without legal representation, but it would help you if you've got legal representation. In a criminal court, you don't have legal representation because the state has the duty to prosecute. So the issue of this then makes it more accessible to people to basically lay a charge of a hate crime or hate speech, and then the matter will be prosecuted. It'll be the accused who will have to get legal representation to defend themselves. But I chair and I think the officials can add, but the bill does criminalize racism. It just criminalizes other harmful utterances relating to other issues in the Equality Clause. Now, the increasing crimes, look, as I said, hate crimes are existing crimes. It's just elevating them. And that is important in a society, and I think globally, a world that is showing greater intolerance. And it's to try and, it won't stamp them out entirely, but it's in trying to put greater penalties to say this is a more serious crime. So you attack somebody, let's take political violence, you attack somebody during a political campaign, it will be assault, grievous bodily harm, etc., right up to murder if they get killed. If you can prove that the reason was because of their political affiliation, it then becomes a hate crime, it becomes more serious, and we would hope that would provide more of a deterrent to that kind of activity. The new crime, as I said, is hate speech. So as far as hate crimes, I don't see too much of what the issue is. The crime of hate speech, as I said, is new, and that was because we've only got crimen injuria as a crime, and it's not particularly clear what all the elements are. Definitely the context in which words are used becomes important. So on a lighter note, the N-word. If I were to use as a white person to use the N-word to somebody, I would be regarded as being racist. If the secretary of the committee were to use it to one of his colleagues, it's part of the lingo. You know, young people, young men particularly, use the word in reference to each other in a non-offensive way.
Which one?
Nigger.
Which one?
Nigger.
What is it?
It's an American term, but it's basically it's an American term for an African American, but it's become, so it was a negative word, but it's become then, I think, well, I don't want to bring the secretary in, but younger people of the same race call each other that, but I can't call it because it's the context. So you're right, Chair, we wouldn't want to be criminalizing any religious text that used the K word, and the context is also important. As you know, there's a case before court at the moment. Can a black person who called another black called another black person use the K word? Is that racism? Can you be racist if you call another person of that? I mean, the court still has to decide. But yeah, it would be context very much. As far as this isn't criminalizing morality. So for example, so I don't think we're running ahead of people. Because it's basically things that in terms of the Constitution are already wrong. And then as far as, look, I'm not sure the Forum Against Racism that you're referring to, there is a program in terms of the Durban World Conference Against Racism, to draft a national action plan against racism, xenophobia, racial intolerance, and related intolerances. And that is in the process of being finalized. It was put out for comment. And then the report, we can produce the report. Look, you'll be putting it out for public comment anyway, so you will see what responses you get and whether people feel that their concerns were addressed, but they were primarily on the religious question, which we think we've addressed by providing for, amongst other categories, a sort of partial exemption for religious preachings. But I don't know, Chair, if the officials want to add anything.
No, just I don't want to. Honorable Mutap didn't even know what nigger is. Before we spoke about African Americans, black people were called niggers in America. And it was regarded as an insult. But if you go to Africa, you have a country called Nigeria, derived from the word nigger. Nigeria means the land of the black people. And now you have a country called the Sudan. Sudan means the land of the black people. Now, that's why I say that, we need to know where we come from, understand things, because we may even be criminalizing things that normally should not be criminalized. The Eastern Cape was called Kafreria, the land of the black people. So that's why I'm saying that education should be very important and so on. And that's why I raised the question of desirability and whether or not we are not running ahead of the people. But the bill is before us for discussion. Let's open the floor for discussion. Honorable Short, I'll take the names.
No, Chair, thank you. And from our side, we do understand the need to address the increasing racism in our nation. And so broadly from our side, we would support the hate crimes aspect. But obviously we'll be looking very carefully at that. As far as the hate speech is concerned, we have engaged with the Minister, and we are grateful for his engagement with the religious sector and the fact that there has been wide consultations, and this is a good example of participatory democracy and the insertion of this exemption. But as the Deputy Minister indicated, it is a partial exemption. And so one would have to establish, first of all, whether it goes far enough. I think the concern is when you look at the existing, and in our view, sufficient crimen injuria, which is directed to an individual. We had the Momberg case where it was shocking, her utterances, and she was found guilty on 4 counts. And the first time a person has been sentenced to jail for hate speech. So the question is correctly, as you put, do we really need this at all? The hate speech side. And this is what we as a committee will have to delve into. Given the fact that it has the common law crime has been used effectively. Secondly, the issue of concern to me is the exclusion of restorative justice when it comes to hate speech. That is a premise that I have advocated for many, many years in this committee, and I don't understand why it wouldn't be something that is applicable. One needs to bear in mind that Papuda, and that is a question as well, why have sections 25 and 28 of Papuda have never been proclaimed? Now, those place a duty on the state and private parties to promote equality and to look at racism. That act still has not been proclaimed. to what degree, if any, if we need hate speech, should it not be inserted into the Papuda Equality Act? And bear in mind that in terms of that act, there's a provision that a court can refer it for criminal prosecution. A quality court can refer it for criminal prosecution as well. The Equality Act is a restorative process. In the case of Vicky Momberg, she was charged criminally and in terms of the Equality Act. So I have a concern still, and I need to study this in greater detail as to whether the hate speech side is at all necessary. I'm concerned at the fact of how the impact it will have on freedom of journalism, freedom of expression, freedom of religious expression. And the Deputy Minister will be aware of the concerns that were raised when he met with the religious sector, and their concerns that there are certain activists that are using existing provisions and that this might be used further. And maybe, Deputy Minister, you remember the concerns that were issued by the Church of certain agendas that were being pursued. Whether this exemption is sufficient, we need to look at that. But immediately I can ask the question, why in sub 2 do you have in good faith, and then you say again, any bona fide? You've got a double-barreled, in good faith, 2, and then A, any bona fide. Now, any bona fide, going to section 16, you lift in the bar. The constitutional bar is being lifted in terms of this act. It's higher. There's no bona fide requirement in section 16, the freedom of expression. That is a concern to us. I'm also concerned, why shouldn't district courts deal with this issue? Why shouldn't traditional courts, as the chairman indicated? Our regional courts and high courts are, and I'm talking particularly now when it comes to hate speech, I don't see any justification. I can understand with hate crimes. But why shouldn't district courts, if you're going to go this route, deal with that? They are already, your regional courts and high courts are so full that is a concern to me. You see, if the ambit is to protect groups of people and not individuals, then one's got to look carefully at your definition of harm, which includes emotional, psychological, economic harm. Those definitions, to me, are too broad. If you're looking at a specific individual, like in the Vicky Momberg case, there was a clear victim there that clearly suffered harm that justified a criminalization. And so, Chair, these are some of the issues we need to look into. I would look forward to a lengthy time of public submissions, given the fact that you say there were 70 to 80,000 public submissions. I'd like to report on that, but just to what degree, as we look into this, to what degree it is sufficient, the exemptions that have now been inserted. Chair, the issue of, you see, we need to understand whether this act, to what degree, Mr. Bassett, is this lining up with the Equality Act and the Films and Publications Act and the Draft Cybercrimes Act. We pass in so many different acts. We need to ensure whether, firstly, they are aligned, and secondly, whether we need the hate speech side of this, given the fact that it is very clearly set out in terms of the Equality Act, given that the Equality Act allows a referral to the criminal courts as well, and then given the fact that you've got criminal injuria as well. Chair, just at this stage, again, we've got the National Action Plan to combat racism, racial discrimination, xenophobia, and related intolerances. That is to be filed at the end of this year. To what degree does this fit into that process? And so, Chair, these are some of the issues, but I do want to just thank the Deputy Minister and the Department for their engagement up to now. It's been very constructive, and I'm sure going forward we will be able to ascertain whether we need the hate speech side of the aspect is needed at all. Thank you, Chair.
There was almost a civil war in the center of Johannesburg because of the cartoons relating to the former president, where some people said, some journalists said it was their right, freedom of expression, and some people said this is against our culture. And now I see also under exceptions that some artistic creativity is excluded. So with regard to the desirability issue that Honorable Swart is raising, if we can also deal with the desirability of these exclusions, as we say, our society is very multicultural, multi-ethnic, and we shouldn't do things piecemeal. Any other honorable, Honorable Breitenbach, Honorable Mutapo, Honorable Skosana.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm very large in this thing that I'm with them. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm largely covered by the Honourable Swart and his comprehensive input. I'm concerned about the bona fide requirement, as you mentioned, that's an issue. I'd like to be sure that we're going to take public participation as a committee. Because I would look forward to that, and I'd like to know from Mr. Bassett if there's some summary of the public input that you got. If we could perhaps have started that, I'd be very interested to see what they were. I mean, I don't want to trawl through all 75,000, but if you've got some sort of summary of them, that would be very helpful. And then we'd have to, as the Honourable Swart said, we'd have to consider very seriously the overlaps with other legislation and the common law. We're passing a lot of legislation, and it makes it very difficult for people who have to prosecute them when there are 5 or 6 or 7 different pieces of legislation that deal with the same thing, to sort out who does what, where, and when. So we just need to bear that in mind. Thank you.
Honorable Skosana. Honorable Mutaba, I'm sorry.
Okay, thank you, Honorable Chairperson, colleagues, Deputy Minister, Advocate Basson, and team. Media. Thank you so much for the presentation and for the summary of this very important bill. What I would like to know, Chairperson, is since 2001, as Honorable Swart has alluded to, and the Chairperson, there has been key strategic guidelines, strategies, and plans. You know them, the Urban Declaration and Program of Action. 2003 is National Forum Against Racism. 2009 is National Policy Guidelines for Victim Empowerment. And then, the National Development Plan is fine. Then we have the National Strategy for Developing an Inclusive and Cohesive South African Society. And then again, there was a research by South African Human Rights Commission, which I requested the Secretary to submit to members, which I think will be very much important in when we engage with this bill. What I would like to know is whether, Advocate Basson, you did take into consideration all these key strategic guidelines into consideration when we were busy with this bill, because it appears they are very, very, very important to in the finalization of the bill. And again, on the issue of PEPUDA, Honorable Swart did make mention of sections 25 to 28, which up to now are not yet implemented. And again, there is a section 10 which has been declared unconstitutional of the same PEPUDA. And I'm happy today, at least some of us were aware that PEPUDA deals mostly with civil inequality cause, and this will deal differently with criminal cases. So what I would like to know is, because we have been informed that PEPUDA was supposed to be amended, but up to 2017 we haven't received anything. Then that's why I say somehow aligned to what Honorable Swart have just said. So the impact it will have on this bill, if those amendments will be made later, and the section 10 which has been declared unconstitutional. And again, the issue of draft national action plan, which is to be submitted to cabinet by end December this year, the impact also thereof. And the issue of traditional issue relating to our tradition and custom. You're aware that Section 30 and 31 of the Constitution does recognize traditional, cultural, linguistic communities. And therefore, I would like to know, because there are other, because we have here, this bill is creating hate speech, isn't it? Therefore, I would like to know, in terms of there's somewhere in this documentation I've seen where you relate to religious belief and so forth. So I'd like to know, there are other things. Deputy Minister John Jeffries made mention of an example of throwing a young boy throwing or girls throwing a stone at a mosque because the intention not known. So I would like to know, in terms of the religion or belief, there are people who hate some of the traditional practices, isn't it? So will the same be said of that, of a person who behaving in a similar manner as the example which the Honourable Deputy Minister has referred to? Let me take an example of initiation school. Initiation school, then a church not being far from that. So the initiation school being practiced, singing. So the church people becoming infuriated, go and ban that initiation school. Will that also fall within that category of that? And some terminologies, like we said, we used to say in rural areas, even in Xhosa, if you are not circumcised, you are called inkwenkwe, isn't it? Lishuburu in our culture. So someone may take you up in terms of that. So also, please clarify me on that. And again, on issue of exemptions, I didn't get it clearly, Deputy Minister, exemptions, if it can be explained thoroughly to me. And also there is on the issue of prevalence, I think the Honourable Chair and Honourable Swart touched it very clearly, and the Vicky Momber case and other cases which the parliamentary staff did mention here, a lot of them. So I think this bill, Honourable Members, is long overdue. It's long overdue, has been overtaken by events. That's why when Ms. Momberg was found guilty of this criminal injury and jailed 2 years, everybody was puzzled. Hey, is it so serious? Because people undermine the criminal injury part of it. That's why I say this DM is long overdue. Thank you, Chairperson.
You know, there's a publication called The Rebus, which is written by learned lawyers.
By?
Learned lawyers.
Okay.
who are supposed to represent us in the courts. It raises the question that Honorable Mutabo raises. Is cultural male circumcision compatible with international children's rights? When lawyers who are supposed to represent us in courts still ask this type of questions, where are we going? Doesn't it mean that we are even running ahead of the lawyers that we have to rely on to defend us?
But can one just say on that one? I mean, I agree with you. It's pretty. I haven't read the article. The LSSA rep didn't give me a copy. But I mean, you know, they complain about cultural circumcision. But what about religious, which is of young newborn babies, which the Muslims and the Jews do? You know, so
okay, we'll give you more time, Honorable Deputy Minister, because I think this raises an important national debate, and I think South Africans will be happy that you tabled such a bill, so that we really can deal with matters that are at the heart of our facing our society. Honorable Skosana, follow up.
Or are you leaving now, because
oh, maybe with can we allow Honorable Buthelezi to speak first?
Thank you, Chair. But I didn't have much to say because what I wanted to say was covered by my previous colleagues, so I wouldn't have anything for now. Thanks.
Okay, Honorable Skosana.
Yeah, no, thanks, Honorable Chair, and greetings to the honorable members, the Honorable Deputy Minister, and the House at large. Yes, indeed, we were dealing with a very complex matter here, which is not easy. Well, I want to know which matter that you raised earlier, Honorable Chair, on the issue of the regional courts, the accessibility of regional courts to our various communities, because I mean, ordinarily courts that are closer to our communities are the magisterial district courts, the traditional courts also. So I'm just wondering as to how our people are going to be able to access the regional courts in terms of this matter. But secondly, the issue of step-by-step of reporting the cases on hate speech. What would be the first step that a person must then take to report such a case, if it have to be taken to a regional court for prosecution? Now, the third question I see on the issue of the exemption that says on clause 4.2d, excludes from the ambit of hate speech any bona fide interpretation and proselytizing or espousing of any religious tenet, belief, teaching, doctrine, or writings. And I've heard one of my colleague, Honorable Swart, indicating that, well, from their side, they are happy with the thorough consultations, I think, of the department with various religious leaders on this. Because when I look at it, I think religious, or a religion is in its nature, one religion opposes the other one. So when a Christian preaches, in most of the cases, he or she will offend a person maybe who believes in a traditional religion. Because he would say, in Christianity, you don't have to do this. If you are doing this, you are doing that. And that what he or she will be referring to is what other people's beliefs in. See, so I'm just looking at these things of exemption to say, because the understanding is that you are preaching, this is Christianity, this is Muslim, this is Hindu, this is African traditional religion, so there's that exemption. But now what about the rights of those whom, while you are preaching your own religion, you then, I think, in a way, taking down the dignity of the other religion. I'm just checking on that as to how are we going to then pass there. And then also on the issue of artistic creativity, I think on the same page, which is page 6, which speaks about clause 4, it says artistic creativity or performance or espousal of religious doctrine will not qualify for exemption from hate speech if it advocates hatred that constitute incitement to cause harm based on any protected grounds. Well, I've underlined the if it advocates. But on the artistic creativity, because, for instance, when you look at the issue of comedians, most comedians, well, normally when they put their jokes, it would, in a way, offend somebody. Their jokes will be on race, it will be on ethnicity, it will be on various religions, it will be on sexual orientation. So if here we say artistic creativity or performance will not qualify for exemption from hate speech, I don't know as to what extent does it affect those who are practicing or who are in that field of artistic creativity. Because, yeah, I mean, in the main, especially comedians, I mean, generally what they are saying in the name of comedy, but it will, other people might not feel comfortable. Well, others would accept that, no, but this is just a comedy. It's not intended to degrade a certain race, degrade a certain ethnic group, or degrade people of a certain sexual orientation, etc., or cultural practice. So I'm just looking at it as to say, how are we going to manage that moving forward? The next point, Honorable Chair, the issue of elevation in terms of the hate crime. I've heard the Deputy Minister indicating that if a person has committed a certain crime, maybe there's an assault, and therefore maybe there's a suspicion that this assault is not just only assault, but this assault, it has to do with race, or it has to do with ethnicity, it has to do with sexual orientation, it has to do with other things other than in it being an assault only. So that kind of a crime must be then elevated. So at what stage do we elevate? Because a person would go to a police station, report and say, there's an assault case, and then it obviously go to the magisterial court. Then at what point do we then say, no, this have to be elevated to a regional court because it's not only an assault, but there's an hate crime part of it. When do we do that? Do we do that when it's at the magisterial court, district court, or whenever there's a suspicion? Maybe at the SAPS, after the case has been reported, when there's a suspicion, it will then be elevated. Because I see it's going to be, in my view, it's a very complex thing. Because when you look at the list in terms of the hate crime, I mean, in terms of the hate speech and stuff, list of the things that we have mentioned, it will only be on the basis of suspicion. It means every time when people of two races, they've assaulted each other, even if there's nothing to do with the race, but there will always be a suspicion that, no, this is it's race-related. Or even people of two different ethnic groups. Just because they belong to two different ethnic groups, it means we have to check as to whether is it not on the basis of ethnicity. If one is disabled, is it not on the basis of the disability? If one is of a different sexual orientation, is it not on the basis of that? It looks more complex in dealing with that. So at what stage do you then say, no, this one will have to elevate it? The last point, which I think my colleagues also spoke about it, the issue of overlapping with other legislations. How do we manage that? Thanks, Honorable Chair.
I think lawyers will have enough business to deal with these overlappings, but unfortunately, I doubt if our lawyers are well equipped to deal with these complexities, because our universities don't teach about our cultures, don't teach about these religions. Now, if Honorable Skosana, you are right to say this is more complex, where are we going to get lawyers who are educated enough to deal with these issues? But also there's this issue of the many documents that went before, whether or not these documents have been taken into account. And also the South African Human Rights Commission reports to the United Nations. We haven't seen the reports that they sent to the United Nations on these matters. What are they saying on these matters? And then I think all these reports could have helped throw some light on the desirability or otherwise of the hate bill. I think that should be the central issue that we're dealing with. Is this matter desirable at this stage? Are these matters not being dealt with under the existing law? On Deputy Minister.
Yeah, well, if I can start, please allow the officials opportunity to add. Let me start again with the desirability issue. I mean, this bill has come from Cabinet, and it so it's the view of Cabinet that it's desirable. I noticed that Honourable Motapo says it's long overdue. Others, you are saying you don't seem to think it's so desirable. But yes, I can assure you it takes into account all other documents. So, for example, you would see when the National Action Plan comes out that one of the aspects is the criminalization of racism-related intolerances, xenophobia, that kind of thing. And as far as the other, so it's part of that. It's not being seen as the panacea to discrimination. It's just simply criminalizing discrimination. And then the other laws, I mean, you'll see, I mean, the issue of the cybercrime, there's no conflict. Ms. Pillay can speak about the Papuda amendments, but, well, firstly, just on that, Honourable Motapo, you said that Section 10 has been ruled as unconstitutional. I'm not aware of that. That's the section in Papuda that refers to hate speech. And it basically, but the problem is although Papuda refers to hate speech, there's no definition in our law of hate speech. Yes, we've got criminal injuria, but Honourable Swart, does criminal injuria apply to a group? That's one issue. Should we not be saying in this context where there is a lot of intolerance in the country that we need this Parliament to define what the rules are, not rely on just on the courts to build the common law, depending on the various people. You will remember, Chair, I think it was a few weeks ago or last week, that I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but a magistrate said it was worse for a white person to use the K word against another white person. I mean, rather bizarre that it was worse for a white person to be called a K than for a black person. Now, rather bizarre logic that. We don't want to leave it up to the courts to define what is a crime or what isn't.
If that white man is a believer, and in that sense he means that the other white person is not a believer.
Islam did not feature.
There are white people who are Islam.
It did not feature in this. But on the steps taken, it's a crime. You report it to the police station. You report it to the police. And the police would have to be trained in terms of looking at motive. It would be for the state to prove motive. Okay, so, and motives sometimes would be difficult, but the state would have to prove it. I mean, if you look at the Ashton Willemse incident, was it racist, wasn't it? Whereas what he said at the time very much was that his perceptions were that he was being racially discriminated against. But it would be basically so as far as access to courts, it would be access to the police station. You go to the police station to report the matter. It then gets investigated, and the prosecutors decide what happens to the case.
A cabinet briefing with regards to the Justice Department as well as the Correctional Services Department discussing issues around hate speech and the bill that is set to be passed, also bringing up a number of issues specifically with regards to words that are used and the context. Well, we take a short break here on SABC Newsroom. Do stay tuned.
If you ask this Irish master whiskey distiller why sometimes whiskey is spelled with an E and sometimes without, he'd say,
"Oh, to be sure. You feel so good, look. It's the whole thing. They're back and get off in the whiskey without the E."
Yeah, didn't catch that. But if you asked us the difference, we'd tell you that every whiskey from around the world is spelled without the E, except for Irish and American whiskies. Cheers. Tops at Spa. Good whiskey, good advice, no Irish accents.
And shut up, you stay lazy and listen.
The Honourable President told me to shut up.
It's up to the leadership of the DA to make a decision whether we continue to fight like we're doing now, or we put the people of the city of Cape Town first.
You must go, Chief. You call me a dog here.
Come back and leave after giving us a signal.
This is SABC News.
As democracy matures, we get into discussing very, very sensitive issues.
I think that there's a lot of people that are applauding it. I'm sure it's going to be appealed.
It is the beginning of a long journey of South Africa fighting racism.
That sticky label of being a white party, so to speak, doesn't seem to want to go away.
So the competition actually helps, and it brings out winning in total.
Stay tuned to Media Monitor every Sunday from 9 a.m.
Have a look at some African stories making headlines at the half hour. Well, reports suggest that 2 children are among the 10 people beheaded in a suspected militant attack in northern Mozambique. The European Union is set to deploy observers to Zimbabwe's general elections for the very first time in 16 years. Libya's rival leaders meet in Paris to negotiate a political roadmap in an effort to bring order to the country. Of course, that breaking news at the top of the hour. Zimbabwe elections will be held on the 30th of July 2018. This was just announced by Zimbabwean President Emerson Mnangagwa through a government document. Mnangagwa, who became president following the military takeover, has promised to deliver on free and fair elections. The vote will put him against a clutch of opponents, including 40-year-old Nelson Chamisa from the main opposition movement for democratic change. Of course, for the very first time in the history of Zimbabwe, that election will be taking place come the 30th of July, but without long-time former President Robert Mugabe. Of course, Mugabe ruled the country since it gained its independence back in 1918. Of course, just a short while ago, the new president, Emerson Mnangagwa, who took over following that military intervention, announced the election date. We are expecting that more than 100 political parties to contest the race, of course, but it is going to be coming down to ZANU-PF as well as MDC. We are now joined by SABC's foreign editor, Sophie Mokoena, who has covered Zimbabwe extensively. Very good morning to you. Thank you very much for joining us this morning.
Morning, Chantal.
Essentially, the election date is out. Is Zimbabwe ready?
Well, it depends who you speak to. Some opposition are likely to say they are not ready. The issue of a voter's roll was one of the issues that concerns were raised around that issue. And you know very well that the other issue is whether you will have enough observers, and observers arriving on time not only a week before elections. So it depends who you speak to. You know very well that since he took office, President Emmerson Mnangagwa has made a commitment that he is going to ensure that elections are free and fair. He has called on people to exercise their will freely, but the problem is come towards election. Will that prevail, or the environment will prevail for people to be able to exercise their freedom?
Essentially, you know, in terms of the diaspora, Zimbabweans can't essentially vote. What sort of development or impact will this have on that?
For now, that matter is today before the High Court, and currently the lawyers of both parties are arguing in court whether the people in diaspora, the Zimbabweans in diaspora, should be allowed to vote outside the country in their embassies. You know, with South Africa, we allow South Africans who are outside South Africa to vote at respective embassies where they are. But that's not the case with Zimbabwe. And today that matter is before the High Court. Arguments are continuing, and we are hoping that perhaps in 2 weeks' time, the court will make a ruling whether Zimbabweans who are not inside the country can be allowed to vote where they are, or in embassies or at the embassies to go and vote.
You know, for the past 38 years or so, Zimbabwe has only known one leader, that of Robert Mugabe. You know, in terms of the current ZANU-PF, how can we describe it? Is it intact? What is the view on that?
Well, ZANU-PF did face challenges. You know very well that former President Robert Mugabe was removed unceremoniously while campaigning had already started. Early campaigning had already started, and they had announced that he is their sole candidate for elections. But unfortunately now it's a different scenario. You have Emmerson Mnangagwa, who is now a candidate for ZANU-PF. You look at the primaries, there were divisions and there were confrontations. People didn't agree. And even now, ZANU-PF is working hard to try and find a solution to those who are aggrieved in terms of the outcome of the primaries. Even today, there are more meetings. The youth movement is meeting. They are trying to find a solution. But secondly, you have President Mugabe, who is aggrieved. You would recall that when he spoke to SABC, when I spoke to him, he's a very, very angry person. And he has got support. I can't quantify in terms of perhaps is it a huge support, particularly on the ground with ordinary Zimbabweans. There are those ministers who are supporting him, former ministers who supported him and who are currently, some of them, in exile. There were reports that there's a new party, it is called NFP. That party is basically looking at getting support from those people who are supporting President Robert Mugabe. When I spoke to him, when I asked him, President Mugabe, whether he is going to vote for that party, he says if they come up with what he believes in, he is definitely going to consider. He can consider. But I'm told that Mnangagwa is currently trying to engage him. I don't know how far true are the reports, but I got a tip off yesterday, in fact, that there are attempts to try and convince him to reconsider his position. And it is for that reason the NFP is not so visible, because they don't know what will be the final outcome, you know, and whether President Mugabe, former President Mugabe, will continue to feel aggrieved and also to not support ZANU-PF, or he may, towards the end, consider. And we still have to verify the reports whether ZANU-PF is trying to engage him. We know that he was summoned to appear before Parliament. He didn't. And when you listen to the chairperson of the committee in Parliament in Zimbabwe, you can hear that they still respect him and they are still careful in terms of what they say about him. And now that the date has been proclaimed, you cannot now ask him to go to Parliament, because you have to dissolve Parliament.
Yeah, definitely. Let's talk about, you know, opposition MDC and, you know, some of the factions that they're seeing currently within their party, specifically since the passing of Morgan Tsvangirai.
Well, MDC is facing serious challenges. You know, the party is now divided. You have Dr. Kupe, who enjoys support in mostly Matebele land, and Nelson Chamisa, who is currently the president of the party or the leader of MDC, trying very hard to ensure that he brings the two groups together, but it's very difficult. And the issue of primaries in Zimbabwe, even the MDC was not spared the tensions either in terms of the results of the primaries, and he's trying to work very hard to try and deal with this. And he is trying his level best, but it is very difficult. Divisions are divisions, and when political party or a political party is divided, there's no way it can really enjoy the support of the electorate. You know, electorate are very sensitive to internal party squabble. They reject you without delay, and will be looking or monitoring the campaigns but also the outcome of the election. So not every party in Zimbabwe has its own challenges, but it will depend on a party or the parties themselves perhaps to find a way to deal with the internal challenges.
Lastly, you know, from a social standpoint, and of course, you know, for any Zimbabwean citizen, is this the way forward in making a roadmap to looking at a new dawn in Zimbabwe?
A new dawn? I don't know. When you still have perhaps people who are part of President Robert Mugabe's government. A new dawn? I don't know. When you have an MDC that is divided. Therefore, I think it is still too early to tell. And fortunately, the international observers will be there. The OAU, the European Union has agreed to send observers. SADC will do the same. Perhaps individual NGOs will do the same. And to ensure that the environment is conducive for free and fair election. Post-election, it's only then perhaps we can talk about a new dawn. But to undo, it's very difficult.
Definitely. We thank you very much for your time this morning. That was SABC's foreign editor, Sophie Moko. And of course, 30th of July, those elections will be taking place for the very first time in 16 years in Zimbabwe. Well, we have been following this morning. The Prevention and Combating of Hate Crime and Hate Speech Bill is currently under the spotlight in Parliament today. The Justice Department is briefing the Portfolio Committee on Justice and Correctional Services on the bill. Well, Cabinet approved the Prevention and Combating of Hate Crimes and the Hate Speech Bill on the 14th of March this year. It is expected that once the bill is approved, that it will help to eradicate not only racism, but also all forms of discrimination. Let's cross back live to those proceedings and the very interesting debate that is currently underway.
Maybe I shouldn't have jumped into it. But if it's part of the preaching, then simply saying heathens going to hell, backward people, whatever other nasty things you can think of, that would be allowed because it's of the religious exemption. However, if it's not part of the bona fide preaching, you know, it's somebody is expressing their own view, then it could be hate speech.
If you say that can be allowed, and 80% of the indigenous people would be offended by that remark, and you say you exempt the person who says it, and when 80% feel offended, don't you think that can even lead to civil war in a country?
Well, look, it's not. Remember, it's specifically from a religion. From it's this. For everybody else, it would be hate speech. But if it's part of the bona fide proselytizing or espousing of a religious tenet, belief, teaching, doctrine, so if it's part of the sermon, then I would say it becomes more difficult because of that exemption. But if it's not part of the sermon, then it would be hate speech.
If they say the cultural, they say, "Hey, you there? Hey, just so then what will then happen? Because those things are there, are prevalent. Yes.
If it's not part of the
exemptions,
if it's not part of the espousing of the religious tenet, so if it's just said, then I would think it would be, yeah.
Agree, Libona, they believe in that culture, isn't it? They believe they are traditionalists.
Yes.
Yes.
But I'm talking
like
about...
like praying their ancestors.
Yes.
In terms of Christianity, is a taboo, isn't it?
If they have the sermon which says you should not pray to the ancestors, then you've got a problem with the exemption. Okay? And I hear what you're saying, Chair, but if it's not part of the sermon, if it's just an expression, then it could fall into the hate speech category.
You know, in the center of Johannesburg, already bishops, Christian bishops, are intolerant of the Muslim. When the Muslims call for prayer, there's this minaret. When those bells ring to call for prayer, some Christian bishops feel offended. And as a result, they say some nasty things. Now the question is, it will be Christians against Muslims, each one of them relying on their religious text. It will be 80% of the Africans relying on their cultural practices. The question is, where are we going to get the lawyers educated enough to draw these fine distinctions in this complex situation?
Yeah. But Chair, just a quick response to that. It would be, that's why it's the Director of Public Prosecutions who must decide on prosecuting, not your ordinary senior public prosecutors, and also why Mr. Bassett referred you to that section of the NDPP having to come up with guidelines.
Okay, Honourable.
No, Chair, I think the examples are illustrating the difficulties with hate speech, the broadness. Because we're talking about, if you have individuals, then it is far easier. If you've got groups, as you correctly say, there are Christians that might say something that might offend other faiths or traditional, but it works the other way as well. It works the other way as well. That you might have Muslims saying something against the Jewish faith, or Muslims saying something against... So this is the challenge, where you've got groups involved. Where you've got individuals, it's far easier to determine this. And Deputy Minister, I'm concerned when you speak about limiting the religious exemption to preaching, because here it speaks about proselytizing. Proselytizing is a traditional religious person that speaks to a Christian and says, you must come back to a traditional religion. Or a Christian saying to a Muslim, convert. Now so it's not limited. It can't be limited. But if you're saying it's limited, then it's a massive concern. But it can't be, because you said preaching only. Many faiths go out and walk. The Jehovah's Witnesses goes door to door to door. And that could be very offensive to other people. So this is what it illustrates the challenge. And you've correctly tried to address the challenges. But whether you've done it sufficiently will be for this committee to decide whether we open up a hornet's nest with hate speech or not, or whether we deal with hate crimes. I think that is the biggest ambit. But I just wanted to ask you on the bona fide. You see, you haven't addressed the issue of raising the bar above what the Constitution requires. Double dipping is the first issue, but the bona fide artistic creativity is not in the Constitution. There's no such thing as that. But can I ask the test? Is the test for harm subjective or objective? To me, that is my concern, is that it appears to be subjective from the view of the group or the individual, and that is the challenge. That's the last, and the last issue is what the chairperson said about the overcrowding of our high courts and our regional courts. They're not dealing with it now. We've just done the budget. You know the overcrowding. Now to elevate, I can't see it ever justifiable to elevate hate speech to regional court and to the high courts. They are so overcrowded at the moment. So these are issues which we will unpack, but I want to emphasize our gratefulness that you are seriously, and you have been engaging with the various communities and their concerns. And I think, Chairperson, this requires a broad engagement of all the different sectors, which I think will be helpful as we go forward. Thank you, Chair.
There's a follow-up by Honorable Mutapo, and then let's welcome the Minister and allow him
Minister,
to
I'm sorry, I didn't acknowledge you as well.
No.
We'll talk about what?
Proselytizing.
Proselytizing.
Going out to recruit
Evangelizing.
people, evangelizing, recruiting people
to your own religion.
Okay. Minister and Deputy Minister and Advocate Basson and your team. That issue of Bassett.
That is a former Chief Master.
Okay. The issue of, I asked a question relating to beliefs. The belief, is it also inclusive of traditional lists? Yes. Because somewhere in the early
Speak into the mic.
there was this issue in Limpopo where there is an association now in terms of Traditional Healers Practice Act. They are now mobilized under Dr. Gianni of Skukuneland. I was telling our secretary to involve them in the whole thing. They approached us, a firm of attorneys in Bulugwane, Mangwe Magabane, because the South African Council of Churches, where most of these churches belong, Christian churches belong, are members, we're holding a sermon somewhere and saying, please stop praying, honoring ancestors, because in terms of their language they say, "Kima demoni," when they are demons. So they approached us to say, no man, we are not happy. Very angry, very, very angry. The religious people are saying, our ancestors, whom we honor, as traditionalists, we believe in ancestors. They are saying our ancestors are demons. Please deal with these people. So we organized a meeting between the South African Council of Churches and traditional health practitioners, healers practitioners, to try to mediate. And they were very, very, very angry. So if this bill is intending to address such things, I'll be very, very much happy. And unfortunately, before the minister came, there was no response in that regard in relation to traditionalists. That's why I wanted that term which was used. Or does it also include what I'm referring to? Because I understand you consulted on with religious leaders, but they were somehow excluded and they are mobilized. I remember I even told our secretary to involve their chairpersonship, Dr. Gianni, in that regard. Thank you.
And they are a statutory body.
He's also assisting the Minister of Health in other, is advising him on other. They are sitting on his advisory board.
Okay. The Minister wanted to say a few words, and then can I also respond at the end?
Okay. Honourable Minister.
No, thanks, Chair, and apologies for coming late into the debate. In any case, the entire legislative program of the department has been delegated to the Deputy Minister, as you may well be aware, and therefore I've played a minimal role in most of the legislative processes. I may just indicate that when the bill initially confined itself, and it's in a sense in response to the proposition that the hate speech component be dropped, I'm not sure whether that was a firm proposal, but if that be so, I would want to respond in this way, that when the bill initially was put together, at some point, the issue of hate speech in particular was dropped. We had a very long engagement between myself and the Deputy Minister to say that it would be most unfortunate if in the face of resurgence of hate speech, to the extent that even the courts have come to the party, as we all are aware, and actually taken the lead by not only giving civil relief, by going further and granting criminal recourse to those who feel that they have been the victim of racial assault, as I would put it, and other forms of prejudice. We will once again find ourselves as a parliament opening ourselves to criticism that here we are again failing society by not taking the bold step of ensuring that as the parliament of the people, we lead in giving full effect to the objects of the Constitution. You'd recall the criticism that we had in the Nkandla matter. I think, and in other matters, I think that this parliament should be bold in executing its constitutional mandate and lead society. That's why we're here, as a general rule. Now, coming to the specific issue, let me also indicate that it would be unfortunate that when the matter is already settled at common law, which dates back 2,000 years ago, long before issues of racism in the manner that they present themselves in our context, for example, that is underpinned by a legacy of colonialism, etc., had already given relief, recourse, with regard to abuse of speech that is offensive enough as to cause harm. We come in 2018 and say, this is a matter that we're going to defer. Defer till when? When Rome is burning. So I really think that we'll be failing society, in my opinion, if we fail to seize the moment and actually assist the courts in further strengthening our tools, or their tools, to be able to deal effectively with the scourge of not only racism, but other forms of social prejudice. So that would be my starting point, really. But getting into the specifics, I mean, again, if the common law has been able to delineate between that which is offensive enough to attract some form of penalty, civil or criminal, surely we should equally be in a position, with all the jurisprudence that has evolved over the years, that has offered some, or should offer some, guidance as to where the line could be, armed further with the clause in the Constitution, we should be able to. I mean, in responding, for example, to the question about religious assault, I mean, I do not see difficulty here. And maybe it's because I'm too blind to see. Because when I was still at university studying law, I used to have a pastime reading different things. And I took time at some point to read about the history of Christianity in the Roman Empire when persecutions occurred. And my limited understanding of the literature that I was able to go through pointed to the fact that the Christian religion was intolerant of other religions, to a point where the Roman Empire felt that it was becoming a threat to the integrity of the empire. And that's what gave birth to all this persecutions and the martyrdom, etc. And my understanding is that the Christians were conscious that they, in fact, were intruding into the faiths of others, and by seeking to impose their own faith over those of others by calling them paganism and everything else, and calling on everybody else to subscribe to no other religion except the Christian religion. So it became a political issue. And I think that those are some of the historical experiences that society has gone through to arrive at a conclusion that says, for the sake of harmony in the world, actually, religious tolerance must be the order of the day, so that no religion should seek to undermine, to castigate any other, right? So I don't think that anybody has a right in our constitution, for that matter. And in response to Memutapo's point, to go out there and actively castigate and indulge in provocative, utterances and conduct that would disturb the peace in society. So personally, I don't see a difference, and I think the Christian religion itself, and that may well be true of all other religions, have come to terms with the reality that the only way that human society can live at peace with itself is to acknowledge the right for coexistence of different cultures, different religions, different linguistic groups, etc. And that is what I believe underpins the kind of constitutional order that we have adopted, and whatever these laws are about seek to reinforce that. And for me, that is the point of departure. But I may be losing.
Thank you, Honorable Minister, for throwing some lights on this. I'm just wondering whether, having received this briefing, as a committee, we shouldn't sit and on our own deliberate